By 21, she owned a home.
Has her future ripped away.
This was a particularly brutal attack.
They stabbed her multiple times on that road.
This would have been a horrifying death.
Police discover unwanted admirers prone to violence.
He was covered in blood and had blood in his hair.
And always carrying a knife.
He was jealous and said that he'd kill her.
But the evidence leads nowhere.
The investigation is getting older and older and harder to solve.
I didn't think we were going to get an answer for this case.
Until a surprise breakthrough.
I was beyond excited. I actually shouted, "Oh my God," at my desk.
Points to a killer off the radar.
Right away, I'm like, who's that guy?
Why? Why did someone do this?
People said, oh no, he wouldn't kill anybody, but he had this pretend life.
He had no criminal record. He did not emerge as a likely suspect at all.
Germantown, Wisconsin, a sleepy village celebrated as one of the best places to live in America.
I grew up in Germantown. It's, a small community. I would ride my bike to the store for my mom. It was not someplace that you were afraid of.
Germantown is a small town near Milwaukee, a lot of farmland, a lot of open spaces, just a lot of dairy farming, some factories, and homes.
But on May 28, 1999, this bedroom community wakes to a horrific crime.
Yeah, I have a body up here on River Lane. There's a green car there, green Pontiac car. She's laying by the curb. There's blood on the road.
I got a phone call that there was a suspected homicide in the industrial park. I immediately went to the crime scene. I saw a vehicle on the side of the road facing west, a large amount of blood in the roadway. I observed what appeared to be footwear impressions in blood. I saw what appeared to be drag marks of blood, two large pools of blood, and alongside the vehicle was a female lying face down. When we rolled her over, she had a significant number of what appeared to be stab wounds on her front. She had stab wounds on both sides of her neck.
She had some blood on her hands, and we're always hoping that there's a fight so she can either scratch the attacker. So the hands were swabbed for DNA.
We proceeded with the perspective. She may have not been expecting it, and things went south very, very fast. I do believe there was rage in this case.
That usually is indicative of personal, that they know each other, and it's almost to the point of overkill.
Who was this woman who had been so savagely murdered? Investigators looked to the victim's car for answers.
The vehicle itself appeared to be parked in a reasonable manner alongside the road.
Her car keys were by her body, so she probably had them when she got out of her car and then dropped them in the fight.
The keys indicated that she willingly got out of the vehicle and talked to someone, and then the homicide occurred. The stabbing continued not only in the roadway, but on the grass at two different locations. And then it looked like it may have occurred alongside the vehicle.
There's blood spatter and cast off on her wheel, on her hood, on her fender, and up on her windshield.
Her purse was in the vehicle. There was $200 in her purse.
This was not a robbery. This was something else.
After finding a driver's license, police determined the victim is 22-year-old Teresa Wesolowski.
Out on the road, there was tire acceleration marks leading away from the pool of blood in the roadway, as if you put your foot on the accelerator and peeled out, confirming to us that there was another vehicle in front of her where she was more than likely stabbed.
Police comb the crime scene, but no murder weapon is found. As detectives try to make sense of what happened to Teresa, her lifelong best friend Michelle gets a call.
Terry's brother called, and it was early. Not that it was out of the ordinary because we were all so close. And so I answered, and he's like, Michelle, Terry never came home last night. Well, I'm going to start calling police departments. And Germantown said, we have her name on file. You'll have to come and speak to a detective.
Michelle and Teresa's brother rushed to the station. They had last seen Teresa the day before when she left for work.
I'll never forget, the officer was in front of me. And I said, where is she? And he said, I'm sorry, she's gone. And I just remember screaming. Someone just told me my friend is gone. What does gone mean?
Born in Germantown, Wisconsin, Teresa Wesolowski grew up an outgoing girl with a magnetic personality.
Everyone was friends with Terry. We became best friends in 6th grade. And then from that moment on, we were inseparable. We were sisters. There were not many people that called her Teresa. She was always Terry. I think the only time that I remember her being called Teresa was when her mom was mad. When we had done something wrong. It was always just her and I on the playground. I mean, we were just always, I want to say, running the neighborhood, you know? I can't remember a weekend that I wasn't at her house.
As she got older, Teresa was fiercely independent, buying a car at 16 and moving out on her own at 18.
She was working at Cousins Subs in Mequon, and she would go there at 7 a.m., and she would get done by 1, and she would head over to Stone Container, and she would work till 11 o'clock at night.
Despite a heavy work schedule, Teresa loved to be social.
Oh, Terry was fun. You know, Terry liked attention, and she definitely liked the attention from men. Men just seemed more attracted to her. She was young, she was beautiful. Any guy would have wanted that.
How, then, did someone so driven and well-liked meet such a horrible fate?
Young female, you know, at the beginning of her life, getting things together, and it's ended.
Back at the station, investigators reach out to Teresa's family and friends to piece together the hours leading up to her death.
Her shift ended at 11, and the last that anybody saw of her that we know of was that she got into her vehicle and left that parking lot.
During the interviews, detectives get their first tip.
That morning, the officers received a contact from somebody at the Department of Public Works. They had a channel on the same radio system that the police department was on, so they would know that the homicide occurred. They indicated that somebody driving a truck pulled into the parking lot. An individual got out, and they said that he was covered in blood and had blood in his hair.
Is this man somehow connected to the crime scene? Detectives head over to interview the witnesses, who tell police they'd never seen the man before.
We were told the truck driver asked if there was a hospital nearby, and then he indicated now he'd just clean up in the bathroom, which he did, and then left.
It's very common that the person who's doing the attacking gets stabbed too or cuts himself, especially if there's a struggle. Now we had a suspect, a viable suspect, and now we needed to find that person to figure out what happened.
Coming up, detectives uncover suspects with violent tendencies.
He said he can cut people like paper. He could become abusive and violent.
And untangle a web of deception.
Well, he was never married. He didn't have any kids.
He said, I don't want to be a snitch.
Leading them to a suspect they never imagined. We
really felt that we had turned the corner on this case.
It was almost surreal. It got me because it wasn't anyone I knew.
Hours after finding Teresa Wesolowski stabbed to death at the side of the road, police search for a man seen covered in blood at a nearby public works building.
We had a very good police artist. He did a sketch of the individual based on the statements from the witnesses, put the word out there into the community.
While police wait for leads on the bloody man, they shift their attention to Teresa's home to look for clues.
I went down to Teresa's house. We made a search of the residence. I checked the shoes in the residence against the footwear impression at the crime scene, and none of them matched. So the footwear impression at the scene weren't Teresa's.
Investigators talked to Teresa's family and friends, hoping to learn more about her. They learned she was dating someone named Charlie.
Charlie was a young man who didn't hold down a lot of jobs very well. He was staying at his parents' house. They had been dating for a few months prior to her homicide.
We had known Charlie since grade school. We grew up with Charlie. He was 3 years older than us.
We had some people that we interviewed that said they fought a lot or she wanted to break up with him.
I didn't think Charlie was good for anyone. In Terry's mind, he was temporary.
A couple of weeks before her homicide, we found out that he borrowed her car while she was at work and failed to pick her up. She walked to the tavern, and then they got in a bit of an argument, and she finally said enough is enough.
Friends worried how Charlie might react to Teresa moving on.
Some of the people indicated that Teresa told them this boyfriend was jealous and said that if he caught her going out with somebody else, he'd kill her.
He said, give me 2 weeks and you won't have your friend anymore. You're like, what do you mean I won't have my friend?
So that it raises a flag that we have to determine if it got worse after that or was it just a one evening spat.
You know, stabbing is very personal. That usually is indicative that they know each other.
Why did someone do this? What did she do that was so bad that someone had to stab her repeatedly in this crime of passion?
Police immediately bring Charlie in for questioning.
Charlie was very nervous and seemed to act like he didn't really want to be there.
When police asked Charlie where he was the night of the murder, he says he was home.
He lived in the basement of his parents' house, and he was alibied by his mother. I remember the mother claiming there's no way he could get out of this house without me hearing it.
However, he slept in the basement, which the patio door opens up from the basement outside, so he could leave the house without his parents knowing. At times, Teresa got off of work at 11 at night, and she's found in the morning at 5 or 6 o'clock. So his alibi has weaknesses. It's not airtight.
Could Charlie have snuck out, driven to see Teresa, and murdered her?
Did Charlie have access to a car? He borrowed cars from people a lot. So could he have had a car that night? Yeah, he could have. The homicide's probably less than 5 miles from his house.
Police looked to the tire track evidence.
The tire tracks at the scene were measured and documented. I made contact with the Michigan State Police, who have a database of vehicles. They came back with a list of vehicles based on manufacturer specifications that could have created that. And it's quite a large list.
While detectives continued to investigate Charlie, they also turned to the box factory where Teresa worked.
Whenever you have a homicide like this and it's right down the road from where she worked, obviously your biggest pool of suspects has to be the guys she worked with. There was a fair number of men that were interested in her, and there were some that, had dated her. There were some that wanted to date her.
It wasn't like she was going out and dating them. She just liked hanging out with them.
So we went to the factory to determine who had contact with Teresa, and is there anything that stands out and points to any particular individual as possibly having done this.
We interviewed one of her co-workers named Mark Lebecki. Mark Lebecki worked the same shift as Teresa.
Mark was known as a soft-spoken but well-liked guy at the factory.
He's a very quiet individual, very reserved. Most people would describe him as very mellow.
Working just a few machines away from each other, Mark and Teresa had become close.
He talked to her at work. He was a nice, likable person.
And it got to the point where they developed kind of a friendship.
Unlike the men at the factory who wanted to date Teresa, Mark preferred sharing stories about his family.
Mark Lebecki told Teresa that he had a couple kids and he kept photos of them in his wallet. He would show them to Teresa, saying, "These are my kids."
He talked to her enough to create a relationship that she felt the need to go and talk to him when he needed a friend.
Mark tells police he is saddened by Teresa's death. He also remembers something was off with her the night she died.
He indicated that he saw her that night of the homicide and commented that it looked like she was having a bad day, and she said, yeah, something was jamming in her machine.
She just laughed it off and moved on.
Having no reason to question Mark further, police turned to coworkers with a less amicable relationship with Teresa.
There were some statements from individuals that they observed her having an argument with somebody by the vehicle before the night of the homicide.
The man Teresa was arguing with is identified as her coworker, Isaac Alvarez. When police dig into his background, they find some troubling details.
Isaac Alvarez was just a little bit weird, and he always carried a knife.
At one point, he was upset with a coworker, and he said, "I'm going to cut that cracker, or I'm going to knife that bitch." He told somebody else that, he can cut people like paper.
His comments about cutting up a supervisor, those are the comments that we heard, and those are the comments that kept our interest in him.
To find out more, police look into Isaac's personal life.
His ex-wife indicated that he did have a knife he always kept on his belt, and she indicated that he could become abusive and violent after one drink.
Police bring in Isaac to shed light on his relationship with Teresa and why they were arguing at work.
And in talking to him about Teresa, you could see the emotion coming out of him. This was very stressful for him. That's also the type of stressor that might cause somebody to commit a homicide.
Then, Isaac reveals something else.
He did ask Teresa if she wanted to meet him for a drink, and Teresa, being who Teresa was, she didn't say, "No way." She said, "Well, we'll see." He shows up and she's not there. Is that rejection?
Had Teresa's rejection sent Isaac into a murderous rage?
We asked Isaac to take a polygraph. Because of Isaac's strange behaviors, outbursts, maybe prone to violence, and always carrying a knife, and he was seen in the parking lot area that night, he was on our main suspect list.
While investigating the stabbing death of Teresa Wesolowski, police focus on her coworkers.
She's working in a factory populated by mostly men. That sets up a scenario where you're going to have people trying to ask her out. She was outgoing and she was friendly, so people could perceive that as being led on, where in fact she was probably just being nice.
She always tried to let him down easy. She would always be like, "Well, I don't want to hurt his feelings." She just wanted to make sure that they still wanted to be her friend.
At the police station, investigators interview one of those workers, Isaac Alvarez. Witnesses saw Isaac argue with Teresa before the night of her death.
Isaac's alibi, when he was interviewed, he was home. He lives with a 50-plus-year-old lady. His story was he went to bed at 9 o'clock, and he may have had a conversation with her when she came home, but he doesn't recall. She says she had a conversation with him 11:15, 11:30 at night, and she thought it was around 1 o'clock when he went to bed. It's a little different than his story. Well, in his case, is that person willing to lie for you? We don't know. So that's not an airtight alibi.
Police convince Isaac to take a polygraph.
He was somewhat deceptive and not answering the questions in the proper manner, and so we believe that he was trying to skew the results of the polygraph.
You couldn't get a good answer from him.
So because of that, it was ruled inconclusive.
Without any hard evidence, police can't charge Isaac for the crime. While detectives look for more leads, Teresa's autopsy report arrives.
Based on the injury patterns, the attack was a surprise attack because we did not see a significant amount of defensive type injuries. And then she was pinned in a prone or face down position. I individually identified and labeled 47 separate stab wounds. This would have been a horrifying death for any individual.
As police review evidence, they follow up on the lead on the bloody man from the Department of Public Works.
They had a sketch made of this unknown person that stopped at the garage to wash up.
We put it out there. The individual didn't come forward. It was out in the press. It was in the newspaper. I did go back and re-interview the witnesses, but nothing came back of evidentiary value.
Police also continue interviewing Teresa's friends.
I always protected Terry. So when she was killed, I had no purpose anymore. And so I gave my all to whatever they needed. It was hours and hours and hours of interviews with the police, trying to give them everything that I knew about every person we had ever hung out with, for me to help them to hopefully find who did this.
One of the people detectives learn about is Jerry Kirkpatrick.
So Jerry Kirkpatrick was a delivery guy to Cousins where Teresa worked.
Friends say Jerry asked Teresa out numerous times.
I don't think she was looking to have a relationship with him. He was definitely interested in her.
That's the indication that we got, that he was pursuing her more than she was pursuing him.
Police learn about one encounter with Jerry that left Teresa unsettled.
I thought I saw Jerry before she died at the club, just watching us. And it gave me this feeling like, why is he here? Like, he shouldn't know we're here. Why is he standing off in the shadows? It was a very creepy feeling.
So the question is Jerry stalking her?
But then, Teresa's friends point out something else disturbing about Jerry.
They thought he might be similar to the picture of the person that was at the Department of Public Works. The drawing looked like him.
Officers immediately interview Jerry at his home. Jerry denies he is the man in the sketch. He claims he was at a bar with his stepbrother the night of Teresa's murder, then went home before midnight.
There was alibi information that was confirming of the statement. When he got home, he called for a pizza to be delivered, and that was confirmed subsequently with phone records. He let us look at his vehicle. We examined the interior, exterior. Nothing of evidentiary value was located in that examination.
Then, investigators make a startling discovery.
There were knives found at Jerry Kirkpatrick's residence.
A lot of times we'd ask people, do you have knives? And can we see those knives? Do you mind if we have them tested? A lot of times that's done for a reaction. So he presents 4 or 5 knives. He did let us look at them when we were at the house. We even submitted them to the crime lab to have it analyzed.
While investigators wait for results, Jerry's landlord delivers some alarming news.
What happens within the next few days is he talks to his landlord about breaking his lease.
Jerry Kirkpatrick decided to move out of town, and that's in the midst of being interviewed and the investigation. So right away, that raises our suspicion.
Was Jerry trying to give detectives the slip?
It is clearly a red flag, and we have to look at that behavior as being possibly flight behavior. So we want to find out why.
While investigating Jerry Kirkpatrick for the brutal stabbing of 22-year-old Teresa Wesolowski, detectives learn from Jerry's landlord he's about to skip town.
The landlord knew the police were talking to Jerry. We were actually notified by the Milwaukee Police Department because the landlord had thought, hey, this is odd, and called them. He says he's going to move to Tennessee. One of the aspects you look at in a homicide, is there any flight behavior? after the homicide. Well, breaking your lease and moving to Tennessee might be described as flight behavior. We did confirm that he put money on a place on that Friday after the homicide.
But when investigators get the lab results back on Jerry's knives, the case takes a frustrating turn.
Nothing came back of evidentiary value.
Somebody having a collection of knives is not that uncommon, especially in Wisconsin. And the quick move that he made is something strange, but there's nothing we can do about it. If he wants to move, he can move.
Police have one more lead to follow. Jerry's resemblance to the bloody man at the Public Works building.
He fit that description. We actually did an in-person lineup with Jerry, and he was not picked out by the individuals that observed this person driving the truck.
That person was never identified and never located.
Without any hard evidence linking Jerry to the murder, police have to let him go. Weeks go by, and investigators worry the case will grow cold.
We're doing interviews. Some people we're re-interviewing, but as time moves on, the investigation is getting older and older and harder to solve.
As the weeks turn into months, investigators doggedly work the case.
Well, I technically could have retired about 5 years before I did. A lot of it is to bring justice for the victim, but also to bring some sort of resolution or closure for the family.
The police kept telling me that it was someone close to her because of the horrific nature of it. I alienated myself from people because I just didn't know who I could or couldn't trust.
Months turn into years, but Teresa's loved ones make sure she's not forgotten.
Once a year on the date of the murder, the families would come out and hold vigils. It was a way for the family to try to say that we're still fighting to resolve this case.
But we use it as a way of seeing who is showing up and maybe more importantly, who isn't showing up.
Nothing seems out of the ordinary until 2005, 6 years after the murder, when Teresa's family notices something unusual.
Her mom had called me and said, "Did you happen to go out and leave flowers for Terry?" And I said, "No, I didn't."
These arrangements showed up, and they checked around and didn't know who put them there. So that always leads you to believe, is there somebody out there that's feeling guilty about committing a homicide and leaving something on a gravesite?
We had a camera installed to see if maybe we could identify the next time somebody did something like that. But we didn't capture any image or anything.
For detectives, it's another dead end. But then, with the investigation on the brink of going cold, a new forensic technology turns this 6-year-old case red hot.
In 2005, I got a contact from the Wisconsin Crime Lab, and Patty said, "Hey, I want you to submit this list of items for us to analyze using a technique called YSTR DNA testing."
With YSTR DNA testing, it allows us to find a very small amount of Y chromosome male DNA and a very large amount of DNA from a female source. So it's like finding that single grain of salt in a large bag of sugar.
Early on, when we had the blood evidence on Teresa's hands tested, it all came back as her DNA. That's a problem because it's not giving us a lead. What happens if we strip away all the X chromosomes? If she's a female and that's all her blood, there should be nothing left.
The analyst retests the swabs of Teresa's hands for male DNA.
The first thing I did was look at the previously run DNA samples to see if there was any Y chromosome DNA present in those. All of a sudden, all the DNA types I developed on her hands are matching a known standard for male DNA. And it was incredible. I contacted Detective Yogers for samples of DNA from individuals known to be connected to the case.
And now we're going to go take DNA samples from all of our suspects. We took what was probably our 25 top suspects, nearest and dearest, ex-boyfriend, boyfriend, that type of thing. That first group was a 0.
Undeterred, investigators submit more samples.
We went back to the list and got a second group
We were testing people that were ancillary people. We had DNA from officers at the crime scene that we used to eliminate.
I didn't think we were going to get an answer for this case.
Then, after over 40 samples, a breakthrough.
The testing came back and only one person matched the Y chromosome found mixed into the blood on Teresa's hand.
Detective Yokers called me and said, "You're not going to believe this. The last guy that I swabbed is the guy that has a positive match on that DNA."
After 7 years investigating the murder of Teresa Wesolowski, detectives have now matched DNA from the scene to one of their suspects.
I was beyond excited. I actually shouted, "Oh my God," at my desk. We had a match from the DNA on Teresa's hands to Mark Lebecki.
Right away, I'm like, "Who's that guy?"
Mark Lebecki is a co-worker of Teresa's. Mark Lebecki was one of the individuals that was interviewed by the officers. His statement was that he and Teresa were friendly at the factory.
So the murder occurs, and Mark Lebecki kept working there and was still working there.
Before they approach Mark, detectives need more than just the DNA evidence.
Now, the other heavy lifting starts because even the DNA evidence isn't going to stand on its own. So we need to bring all these other factors into play in building a case that's sufficient for the DA to charge.
First, detectives go back to the factory to dig deeper into Mark's background.
Some people said, "Oh, no, Mark Lebecki, he wouldn't kill anybody. He's just a puppy." He would show people pictures of little girls, and he said they were his daughters. "What do you think I should get him for Christmas or birthday, whatever?"
When detectives look closer, they discover Mark isn't all he claims to be.
Well, he was never married. He didn't have any kids. So this is just like weird. He had this like pretend life.
Mark Lebecki was pretty much a loner, lived with his parents in a mobile home in a rural area, apparently liked to watch television, play video games.
I think it was just a big fantasy with him, a big game to try to fit in.
What else had Mark been hiding?
We had one person that said that Mark had asked her what she thought he could do to better his chances with going out with Teresa. So he clearly had a focus on her.
Detectives revisit evidence from the crime scene, starting with the bloody boot prints.
The problem with identifying somebody with a common shoe is there's so many of them. There could be millions of those shoes made. I contact a person in Scottsdale, Arizona, the detective in their forensic unit, and he had the foremost outsole databases that existed. And he said, that is a Texas steer outsole. Early in the investigation, we had information about the employees being supplied shoes or they could purchase shoes from the store.
When police search factory records, they make a crucial discovery.
And we determined that Mark Lebecki had submitted a receipt for a Texas steer shoe.
Next, investigators turn to the tire tracks left at the scene.
So we took 56 people out of our investigation and identified the vehicles that were registered to them at the time of the homicide. 5 individuals had vehicles that were able to make that mark at the scene. One of them was Mark Lebecki.
With the evidence piling up, detectives ask Mark to come down to the police department for an interview.
He was quiet. He answered the questions. He was confident, I would say.
That confidence doesn't last long.
When he finds out that his DNA is on her hands, he then starts to try and explain why they are there. What started out as I just talked to her at the door is I didn't talk to her then, I talked to her at a break, and we may have hugged.
Detectives confront Mark with the evidence.
I told him the car, wheel track matches, Your DNA is found on her hands, and a boot that you wear is in the blood footwear impression on the road. So, we're looking at you. You need to start explaining some of this stuff.
Now, it's Mark's turn to drop a bombshell on police.
He said, I don't want to get anyone else in trouble. I don't want to be a snitch. Then he mentioned this guy named Tom Thompson.
Tom Thompson worked at the factory with Mark and Teresa.
At the time of the homicide, the officers that went up and did the canvass at the factory did speak with Tom Thompson. His statement to them was that he knew Teresa. He wasn't necessarily friends with Teresa. They never dated, anything like that.
Mark tells them what happened the night of the murder.
Mark said he stopped on the side of the road to buy some cocaine from Thompson.
He said that when he got up there was a vehicle already parked in front where he parked, and Tom Thompson walked up to his vehicle.
So Thompson goes in, sits in the back seat. Mark said, I am doing the cocaine in the front of the seat.
According to him, Teresa gets in the back seat and gets in an argument with Tom, and he proceeds to stab her. Mark says he only hears thumping and movement in the back seat.
Now it's time to start poking holes in the story. She cannot be stabbed 40-some times in the back seat of someone's car and not know what's going on. The whole interior would have been covered in blood. So that's out right there.
Mark says Teresa flops out of there onto the ground. Tom Thompson continues to stab her and drags her to that location alongside the vehicle.
According to Mark, Thompson then turned on him.
Tom Thompson tell him, you keep your mouth shut, and then he let him go. So he kept his mouth shut. He didn't go to the police.
4 years later, Tom Thompson dies, but Mark keeps silent for another 3 years.
He's trying to explain how he's involved in this homicide, and the easiest thing to do is to blame it on the dead guy.
Detectives re-interview workers at the factory about Tom Thompson.
Everybody to a person said he was a health nut.
We found no indication that he was dealing cocaine or using cocaine.
Investigators asked Teresa's friends if she used drugs.
Terry wanted nothing to do with cocaine. Nothing.
So she wouldn't have gone there to buy drugs from Tom Thompson. What was her reason for being there?
There's one last piece of evidence to examine. The car that Mark drove at the time of the murder.
We wanted that vehicle. We found it by another owner, and we ended up buying it from that guy. We brought it down to the lab and examined it for blood, hair, whatever evidence that we could. That rear seat was taken apart. It was a perforated leather, so there were holes in it. So the blood went down through the holes in that leather, and then they soaked into the foam rubber of that seat.
Does the blood belong to Teresa? It's sent to the lab for analysis.
I was very excited to call Mike Yogers and let him know I had found a possible match.
Ten years after 22-year-old Teresa Wesolowski is stabbed to death, detectives are waiting to see if blood found in the back of coworker Mark Lebecki's car belongs to her.
Those DNA profiles matched the DNA profile from Teresa Wesolowski.
Oh, it was significant. It was an important moment.
But what about Mark's claim that coworker Tom Thompson killed Teresa?
At this stage, and 7 years after the murder, Lebecki is implicating a man who had died 3 years earlier, but it was only Lebecki's DNA that was ever found on Teresa's body. They find blood in a cushion of a seat in Lebecki's car. They find that that's Teresa's DNA. They have his DNA, her DNA, and at that point, the case was made.
That was the final thing that district attorney needed to issue the charge. We really felt that we had turned the corner on this case.
Detective Yogers called me and he said, I just want to let you know that we are going to make an arrest. And I was so excited. I was waiting, just waiting for the news.
Detectives go to the box factory where Mark works.
We watched for him to come out of the building, and Kim and I walked up to him and told him he was under arrest. I was excited. It was a good day.
Mark denies killing Teresa, so investigators are left to piece together what really happened that night.
I think Mark Libicki was a very lonely person that probably imagined a relationship with Teresa and decided she was the one. She was just being nice to people. And he probably read that for more than it was.
I think for Terry, it was more that this guy was telling him his problems at work, and she was a listener. She would listen. He wore on her heartstrings and her niceness as a person.
Then, on May 28th, 1999, Mark made his move.
I think that she was coming out of the building, and Mark, for whatever reason, convinced her to meet him. They meet at the back of the vehicle.
I think that he probably did ask her to come back to his place for the night. And when she said no, he just went on a rampage and just started stabbing her. He stabbed her multiple times on that road. Then he dragged her over to that grass. He stabbed her some more. There's blood flying up on her car. He was a monster that night.
We can only guess at it because he's not talking. We don't have to prove why he did this. We just have to prove that he did.
After the vicious stabbing, Mark returned to his normal routine.
Mark Libicki continues to work at the factory. He doesn't make any erratic move like moving away or changing jobs. He just sort of carries on with life as he did before the murder. He had no criminal record. Mark Libicki certainly did not emerge as a likely suspect at all. It was shocking to hear that Mark Libicki had killed Teresa.
It was almost surreal. It got me because it wasn't anyone I knew.
At trial, Mark Libicki enters a plea of not guilty and sticks to his story that Tom Thompson killed Teresa.
Clearly, his incentive was to try and show somebody else did it back there. But that doesn't hold up.
I don't think the jury bought that at all.
Mark is convicted of first-degree murder, and in November 2010, he is sentenced to 30 years in prison with no chance of parole.
Mark Libicki did not admit guilt. The judge noted that Libicki never expressed any remorse.
In his mind, he's still not guilty. And the judge even said to him, I hope that someday you will admit to yourself that you've done this, because you have done this.
The journey was long and tedious. It will never replace Teresa for the family. She was a good kid. She was moving forward with her life. She probably would have maybe had grandkids. All those things are lost because of Mark.
I have pictures up of us. We had always said we would grow old together and raise our children together. My kids always ask, Mom, why was your friend murdered? I don't know. Is she in heaven? Yeah, I think she is.
A cherished family at the center of a small town.
They laughed and they joked around and they were happy together. They were loved and well respected in our community.
Is gunned down in cold blood.
I'll never forget walking in the house that morning and seeing what I saw. Who could have done this? Was it somebody that they knew? Maybe this person had sought some type of revenge.
Detectives pursue a trail of suspects.
He was actually set to gain from the death.
And then his behavior was alarming.
During the polygraph, he started carrying the stuff off. I know they had had issues within their relationship.
They said, well, I can take care of that problem for the right sum of money.
But the killer remains elusive.
What are we missing? What are we not doing?
Until a shocking confession reveals the true culprit.
Then she agreed to wear a recording device and elicited some more information. I mean, it was just incredible. It was disturbing.
The killer was about the most unexpected thing. It was such a shock.
Columbia, Kentucky is a small but tight-knit rural community.
Everyone knows everyone else. Your neighbors feel like family. People watch out for one another.
Not uncommon, if you're walking downtown, you'll stop, run into friends or family. Very friendly atmosphere.
One of the most beloved families in Columbia are the Wellnitzes. They own a veterinary clinic just steps away from their home.
I just remember that environment at the clinic was a place that I, as a kid, wanted to spend every spare moment that I had, just because it was a great place to be. Joe and Beth, their kids, Dennis and Meg, they were kind, they were loving, and they were fun to be around.
On February 26, 1993, the town forever changes after two of Joe and Beth's employees make a grim discovery just after 8 a.m. at the Wellnitz home.
2 employees had shown up for work, but Joe and Beth were not at the clinic. The clinic was adjacent to the residence. So the gentleman walked over to the house, went in the back door, and discovered Joe's body in the downstairs area of the home. The lady that had also shown up for work that morning, she then went to the house, discovered 2 bodies upstairs.
Joe and Beth and their son, Dennis, they've been shot. Then she ran out and called the police.
Investigators rushed to the scene.
I'll never forget walking in the house that morning and seeing what I saw. It was just total shock. I knew what kind of people they were. I knew how kind they were and how compassionate they were with their work that they did. I couldn't believe it. When we entered the house, there was Joe laying there on the floor. He was on his stomach. His hand was underneath his chest.
He had a pair of gray sweatpants on and a white T-shirt. It looked like he came out of a bathroom and had been shot and fell face first. Blood that had pooled around the body.
My initial reaction was shock. But then I realized shortly thereafter that I had a job to do, and my job was to take care of the scene, to see if we could find out who did this horrible thing. Around the scene where Joe was found, there was multiple shell casings, and you could see bullet holes in the walls. We went from there to the upstairs, and we found Dennis's body laying there in his bedroom. He had no shirt on. You could see bullet holes in his back. There was also shell casings laying around. Looked like he was crawling on the floor and was executed by the killer at that point. Entering into the back bedroom that belonged to Joe and Beth, you could see multiple shell casings back there.
Beth was found on the side of the bed nearest to the doorway. She appeared to have been standing when she was shot, with multiple gunshot wounds to her head and upper torso. The Wellnitzes were all found either in or near a bed or in clothes that suggested they had been sleeping. So it was apparent that it had happened during the night at some point or early morning hours.
After examining the bodies, police scour the rest of the house for clues, but there's no sign of a murder weapon.
There were no broken windows, there was no furniture turned over, the house had not been ransacked. It was significant that there was no forced entry, that at least gave the impression that it was somebody with some degree of familiarity with the home and with the Wellnitz family. It appeared this family had been targeted.
Who could have done this? You know, who is the person that would have done such a horrible crime in this community that is usually so gentle? Was it somebody that they knew? Maybe this person had sought some type of revenge. Once we saw that these 3 people had been murdered, we immediately wanted to know, where is Meg Wellnitz at, so we can find her to make sure she's safe, first of all, make sure she's not a victim. We were able to locate her. She was at school in Lexington and was unharmed.
Officers are tasked with breaking the news to Joe and Beth's daughter.
Meg was told that her mom and dad and brother were murdered, were dead. I really felt sorry for her. I thought, now how is she going to go on? You know, how does she recover from this?
We got a phone call just a little while after I got up, and they said Beth and Joe have been killed. And at that moment, we didn't know Dennis also had been killed. And I just stayed in my room that day and just cried. Just couldn't believe that they were gone. They were like a second set of parents for me.
One of my family members had called. They gave me the horrible news that Joe and Beth and Dennis had all been murdered. And that's a day you don't forget.
Joe Welnitz was born in 1942 and grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. From a young age, he always loved animals and turned that passion into a career.
Not many rural communities anywhere would have been able to boast of having a veterinarian with the background that Joe had. Joe was one of the most caring, kindest gentlemen that you will ever meet.
In his 30s, Joe met Beth Preston, a woman 10 years his junior. Both divorced, they married in 1979, and Joe adopted her 2 kids, Dennis and Meg. 2 years later, they moved their family and Joe's clinic from Lexington to Columbia.
Meg would come in and out of the clinic. Dennis would mostly, I would just see him outside. He was only 20 years old.
Dennis was popular in school. He had worked in town. He had attended college. He was just a well-liked young man.
Beth was the one I was closest to. She was the face of the clinic. She was the person everyone saw when they walked in the door. Always had a smile on her face. The relationship between Joe and Beth was perfect to me. They laughed and they joked around and they were happy together. They were a very happy family.
But one horrific night has changed everything. Who could have wanted to kill the Welnitzes, and why?
The 2 employees that discovered the bodies were certainly interviewed that morning. There was really no motive, and the way the 2 of them arrived that morning, there was really no opportunity for either of them to commit the murders. They were dismissed as suspects.
In Lexington, police asked Meg to help them piece together her family's last movements. She says she visited them for dinner 2 days ago, but had returned that night as she had school.
Meg told the police that she'd been in Lexington the night before the bodies were found, and that she'd been playing cards with some friends, her boyfriend, as well as another couple, Bill Meese, and then Bill Meese's wife.
When asked if Meg was aware of any problems at home, she gives police their first lead.
There was a couple that were tenants of Joe and Bess. They may have had issues with, and their names Brenda and Dave Cowell.
The Cowells had been living in a cabin on the Welnitz property.
They were living there rent-free, exchanged for doing some work for Joe and Beth. There was some discrepancy there about whether they were doing the work sufficiently or not. Joe and Beth felt like they weren't, so they gave them a bill for $1,800 for the rent. And ultimately, they never paid it. They filed bankruptcy.
Were the Cowells angry enough to want the Welnitzes dead? Was this murder payback?
They were persons of interest, people that we needed to talk to. We needed to prove or disprove whether they were involved in it or not.
Coming up, fear races through the community.
We thought if this could happen to the Welnitzes, it could happen to any of us. Who would be next? People were scared. Everybody wanted to know who did it, why they did it, and how they did it.
Everybody was just guessing, gossiping.
And police unearthed family secrets, indicating a potential motive.
It was a surprise to me to learn that there was another child involved. There was actually a will giving him so much money out of the estate.
before a shocking confession reveals a killer no one could have imagined.
It was a bombshell. Couldn't believe it.
Police investigating the homicide of Joe, Beth, and Dennis Wellnitz have their first suspects. Tenants who had recently clashed with the family over money.
When we learned about the bankruptcy, about the them living on the property, this discrepancy about the work they were doing, whether it was sufficient or not, especially when it came to the money, and then this bill for $1,800, we thought, well, this could be a motive for them wanting to do something. We knew that we had to talk to them. We had to see if they were involved.
Police learned the Cowles no longer live on the Wellnitz property.
Maybe they left there disgruntled. We went on that theory. Maybe they had went to the Wellnitz house that morning and then got into it with them, and then that's when all this escalated from there.
While detectives tracked down the Cowles, officers canvassed the area for witnesses.
We did a neighborhood canvass to talk to people to see if anybody in that area had heard anything, seen anything, or had any other information that they could provide. We were not able to identify anybody that did hear anything that went on that night during the shooting or anything.
4 days after the murder, detectives locate the Cowles and bring them in for separate interviews. Brenda claims she didn't hold any grudge against the Wellnitzes.
She told us that even though they had not paid the money that Joe and Beth felt like they owed, they had worked out the discrepancy and everything had moved on from that.
Police asked Brenda where she was the night of the murder.
They ended up moving off the farm. She said she was not there. She was at home when it happened.
When detectives speak with Brenda's husband, Dave, he's unable to confirm her alibi because of his own.
Dave was working in Louisville, Kentucky, which is almost in Indiana, probably 100 miles from where this happened at. He adamantly denied any involvement in this. He didn't want it to do harm to them.
Investigators speak to friends of the Wellnitzes to confirm the dispute with the Cowles had been resolved.
We were talking to friends in that area. We were able to determine that that situation where those hard feelings had been resolved a long time prior to this happening. They were ruled out as far as having anything to do with this murder.
With no arrests made, fear begins to grip the town.
We thought if this could happen to the Wellnitzes, it could happen to any of us. It could happen to anyone. They were loved and well respected in our community, and so if they could be killed, who would be next? People were scared. Everybody wanted to know who did it, why they did it, and how they did it.
Word travels fast. Everybody was expressing their opinion as to what may or may not have contributed to this. But everybody was just guessing, gossiping.
It's got the whole community in an uproar about what happened. We had to get some answers pretty quickly, make sure that it wasn't some random killing and that other people may be coming next. When we started thinking about who could have done this, we started thinking about the veterinary business. People get very sensitive about their pets, so we thought, well, maybe somebody had gotten disgruntled over that. We learned from the employees there that there was an issue between Jerry Yarberry and the Wellnitzes where he had brought in his dog to have treatment done to its eye, and the dog ultimately was blind. So we thought, well, maybe this might be a motive for somebody to do harm to them. Some of the key questions that we wanted to know from Jerry was, how did he feel now toward the Wellnitzes, and how did he feel toward what had happened between them?
Police bring Jerry into the station for questioning.
He told us that he was very upset about his pet. He refused to pay the bill that was owed to the Wellnitzes. They ended up having to file a lawsuit against him in order to recoup the funds.
While Jerry admits he was angry with Joe, he says he isn't a killer.
He adamantly denied doing anything to the Wellnitzes as far as going to that extreme. When we talked to Jerry, we We learned that he was home watching TV with his wife and kids, and we were able to confirm that that's where he was at, and therefore we were able to eliminate him as a suspect in this case.
There's frustration on the part of the police because they want to see a crime solved. They want to see a murderer, in this case, held accountable. They want to see that person punished. And then there's frustration because we don't know if justice is ever going to be served.
As the case threatens to stall, a friend of the Wellnitz family contacts police with pertinent information.
I said, I'm a real estate broker. An hour getting the property ready to sell, there was an indenture, kind of a rectangle, in the floor of that master bedroom closet. I knew for a fact Joe and them kept a floor safe upstairs in their bedroom in the closet. I'm assuming, but that's where he kept all these important papers. His deed, anything that was of significance.
Gives you the opinion that the safe was part of the plan all along, that the killer knew where that safe was at. It was not setting out in the open where you would commit these 3 murders and then say, oh, okay, there's a safe, I'm going to take that with me. It was hidden back in a closet.
It certainly caused the officers to focus their attention on who would want that safe, who would know the safe was there, and who would stand to have some benefit from removing the safe, especially in light of the fact that nothing else was taken, nothing else was disturbed.
If we could locate that safe, and very easily, that's going to put us on the trail of whoever committed this crime.
Police investigating the first triple homicide in Columbia, Kentucky, are searching for an object stolen from the scene they hope will lead them to the killer.
The missing fire safe was certainly a critical piece of evidence that the officers were investigating. They tried to determine more specifically what the contents of the safe were, what was in there, what was going to perhaps turn up that might then be a clue.
In talking to the family, we were able to learn that there was possibly could be insurance papers in that safe, maybe even up to around $1,000.
In this case, the only motive was to either cause the death of the Wellnitz family or to take the safe out.
As detectives put out an APB for the safe, the autopsy results come in.
One of the crucial things that we need to know is the time of death.
As far as the time frame of the death, the internal examination of the bodies was consistent that they had been killed within a few hours prior to the bodies being discovered.
It's estimated Joe, Beth, and Dennis were murdered around 4 a.m.
The medical examiner was able to determine that each victim died as a result of multiple gunshot wounds.
None of the victims had defense marks on their bodies, meaning they had likely been taken by surprise.
Additional projectiles were recovered from the bodies during the autopsy. The firearms examiner did determine that all of the shots were fired from a 9mm handgun. It did seem likely that they were all fired by the same person, given the fact that they were all fired from the same gun.
Obviously, from there, we're going to start doing multiple interviews to try to eliminate or show who has killed these 3 people, who could have that much of a grudge against them. During our investigation, we were able to learn that Joe had another son by the name of Eric. From my previous personal experience with Joe and Beth, I didn't know about Eric until after the murder. Joe had adopted him, much the way that he did with Meg and Dennis, and then that marriage broke apart. It was a surprise to me to learn that there was another child involved that Joe had adopted at a young age. We started receiving information, documentation showing that Eric was actually still set to gain from the death of Joe. There was actually a will giving him so much money out of the estate to the tune of $250,000. Eric was somebody that we needed to talk to because that much money obviously would be a motive for somebody to do something like this.
Police tracked the 19-year-old down at his home in Lexington.
When Eric was interviewed, he was shocked that it occurred. They had had issues within their relationship, him and Joe. It was a very distant relationship and then non-existent after a while. Eric also indicated that he felt like he was replaced by Dennis. They had completely become estranged after so long and had stopped any contact with each other. One of the things that we learned was that Eric did resent Joe. Part of that resentment was because of this estrangement.
Had Eric settled a score and inherited a fortune by killing the family? When police question him about the will, they are taken aback by his response.
When he learned that he was a beneficiary to this will, he was actually surprised that he was included in it, because of they've been estranged for that many years.
But detectives can't just take Eric at his word.
The motive is there, the possibility, so we needed to know whether he had any type of alibi that we could substantiate to make sure that he wasn't in Columbia that morning. We learned during our interview with Eric Wellness that he had worked that night, and then once he got off work, he went to a friend's house and slept at that friend's house.
Eric says he was in Lexington the entire night, 2 hours away from Columbia.
So we were able to talk to that friend and determine that he did not have the opportunity to commit this crime. We felt pretty certain that he was not a suspect at this point. We eliminated him and moved on.
I was shocked, and it was an odd situation being questioned by the police officers. The fact that I was named in the will, if that was something that I had known, then that for sure gives me a motive. But there's no way in the world I could have ever done anything like that. Yes, I was angry as a child, having your dad disappearing out of your life, kind of in a snap of a finger. It was hard, and I was angry, but not that kind of anger where I wished anything bad.
Detectives learn that Meg, the only other surviving member of the family, is also named in the will. Could she have anything to do with the murder?
I really felt bad for Meg at that time because I knew Meg, but we had to get some answers. When we approached her about the will, she didn't know about it. She also wanted answers, She loved them, Joe and Beth and Dennis.
She was so bright and intelligent and loving.
Police ask Meg about her relationship with her parents. She says it was good, but she raises one concern.
Officers did learn that Beth and Meg had some disagreements over some of the people that she was now spending a lot of time with.
One person in particular, Meg's boyfriend, Randy Appleton.
Beth and Joe didn't want him around, so we needed to talk to Randy. Randy became a viable person of interest.
After 3 members of the Wellnitz family are gunned down in their own home, police now have a new suspect, the boyfriend of surviving daughter Meg, 20-year-old Randy Appleton.
Joe didn't go into any details, but he had a concern, I think, of the direction that Meg had taken as far as who she was associating with.
That could be a motive for Randy Appleton.
Detectives asked Randy where he was the night of the murder.
He was leery about talking to us.
Randy tells police he was playing cards with Meg and her friends until 2 a.m. the night of the murder. Then he mentions something that grabs detectives' attention.
We learned that he was interested in firearms. We had learned that he had frequented a firing range.
If the murder weapon had been used at the same firing range where he in fact acknowledged having been practicing with a 9mm, would be a very critical part of the investigation if those shell casings collected from the range matched the murder weapon that was believed to have been used to kill the Wellnitz family.
We're starting to see red flags at this point. Randy was one that liked guns. He did like to go to that firing range and did use a weapon there. We actually ended up going to the firing range and collecting several spent shell casings. All of them were submitted to the crime lab. Our hope was that we could match those rounds through the laboratory to some of the 9mm shell casings that we had located.
2 weeks later, police received the results on the shell casings.
They were not able to find any casings that matched as having been fired from the murder weapon that was used to kill the Wellnitz family.
It was very disappointing that we were unable to tie any of those shell casings to Randy Appleton.
It suggested either that they used a different weapon at the firing range than was used to murder the family, or that it could have been somebody else.
Despite the setback, Randy's love of guns and familiarity with the Wellnitz home means he is still a suspect. Police look to confirm his alibi with those he and Meg claim to have been with the night of the murder, Bill and Regina Meese.
We had to talk to them to see if that was what they were doing, playing cards during the early morning hours, because that was Randy's alibi. Bill was cooperative, where Bill had agreed to talk to us about certain things.
Bill corroborates Randy's alibi.
They were all four together playing cards till the early morning hours. He agreed to take a lie detector test. During the process of the polygraph examiner asked him if he knew anything about what happened, if he had any involvement about what happened.
And then his behavior was something that was alarming. It was something that caused some concern with the officers.
He started tearing the stuff off that you put on during a polygraph and just shut it down right then. And then the polygraph was over at that point. So he did not complete the polygraph. He was just very mad. Definitely raised red flags with us that he knows more than he's telling us, and that he's afraid of that polygraph because that polygraph might tell us more than he wants us to know.
Despite his behavior, police have nothing concrete on Bill and are forced to let him go.
We tried to talk to Regina, but Bill did not want us to interview her. He would get very controlling with her. It's over at this point. We were still running down leads. Obviously, you always get leads that you're going to follow. But one of the things that I thought early on was, if we ever get to a point where Regina and Bill are not talking, we need to go back and reapproach her.
Lacking any new developments, months turn into years, leaving detectives and the Wellnitz's loved ones frustrated.
What are we missing? What are we not doing? They're friends of mine, and this was one of those cases that you want to solve before your career's over. It was just like you were at a dead end, and we couldn't figure that out,
When the case went cold, it was very disheartening just knowing that someone had committed this terrible crime and that they may possibly never have to pay for that. I just remember feeling so sad. Beth and Joe were just such a light in our community.
You don't have any answers when it happened. Had no idea of who could have done it or why they would have done it. There was so little information coming out, it just kind of fell to the wayside. It's just sad.
The case remains cold for nearly a decade. But in 2002, detectives decide to take a fresh look at the triple homicide.
This case is still on my mind. I had never forgot it. And I said, okay, what's the condition or what's the status of Bill and Regina? And I learned at that point that they were separated. That was the thing that we were waiting on before, is when this separation occurred, to go see what Regina had to say outside of the control of Bill Meese.
Police track Regina down, and what she has to tell them is shocking.
When we met with Regina in Lexington, she told us that she had proof of who killed the Wellnitzes.
Nine years after the murder of Joe and Beth Wellnitz and their son Dennis, police finally have a break in the case. One of their surviving daughter Meg's best friends, Regina Meese, says she knows who the killer is and has proof.
When we approached her, she immediately said, I've got this piece of evidence. She essentially wanted some assurance that she wouldn't be charged with tampering with evidence. And I assured her that if she in fact turned it over to law enforcement, I didn't think it would even constitute a crime. At that time, we didn't know if she had photographs that perhaps were taken during the commission of the crime. We didn't know if she may have had the firearm that was used in the commission of the crime, or what piece of evidence that she had. But she shared with us that she had in fact retained possession of the fire safe that had been removed from the back closet in the bedroom upstairs of Beth and Joe's home.
When police asked Regina how she got the safe, she says the person who gave it to her is the one who shot the Wellnitzes.
Regina's the one started the ball rolling. Everything started to fall in place. Regina told us that Bill Meese was the one responsible for the death of Dennis and the death of Joe and Beth Wellnitz. It was very shocking, very shocking.
She had been interviewed by the police before, but had been told by her then husband, now ex-husband, not to talk to the police, not to tell them anything. And it certainly appeared, at least, to be a burden lifted that she was able to share this information.
It was a huge deal when we heard what she had to say. That was the part that we needed to happen, and that from there on, it steamrolled from there.
Regina takes police to her home to see the fire safe.
It was the same type and everything that we were missing from the house that night. It was the same measurements, that same dimensions that we had measured when we were in the Wellness house and discovered that the safe was missing.
When we later compared the bottom impressions on that fire safe to the imprints taken from the closet, it was a perfect match, and in fact it was the fire safe that was stolen from the Wellness home.
Nothing of significant value is found in the safe, but Regina delivers another explosive revelation to police. She tells them that Bill is planning to kill again.
Interviewing Bill Meese's ex-wife, it came to the attention of the police that a mutual friend had had an encounter with Bill Meese where he had offered to kill her boyfriend.
Bill had told her that he would commit this murder for her for $500.
I mean, it was just incredible. It was disturbing.
Was Bill some kind of twisted serial murderer? Police decide to move before he can strike once more.
We initiated this investigation and contacted that lady that Bill had approached.
She agreed to wear a recording device, speak with Bill Meese. He was provided a certain sum of money as a down payment, and the police then arrested him for offering to kill this mutual friend's boyfriend.
With Bill in jail, police question him about the Wellnitz triple homicide.
There was no statements made about the Wellnitz murder that he was willing to make at that time.
When we interviewed him there, I mean, we did not get a confession from him. He denied it at that point. Even though we knew that we were on the right track, it still takes evidence to put this together.
As detectives work on building their case with Bill still in custody, news spreads quickly about his arrest and possible involvement in the shooting of Joe, Beth, and Dennis.
When I first heard about Bill being a suspect, it sent shivers up my spine because I immediately am flooded with the memories of being in junior high with Bill and having very, very strange interactions with him. I was 13, 14 years old. He at one point stabbed me in the leg with a pencil. He had been open about talking about murder and proceeded to threaten me that if I said anything about it, that he'd kill me and my family. I hadn't seen my dad in years when I went to school with Bill. I don't know how they knew each other.
One question remains for police. If Bill murdered the Wellnitzes, what was his motive? Detectives learn another piece of shocking information when Regina tells them Bill might have pulled the trigger, but someone else masterminded the killings.
She did share with us that Meg had been involved in the planning of this murder and that she had wanted it done. Certainly that was shocking to everybody. She said that Meg had ridden with Bill Meese from Lexington down to Columbia late night, early morning when these murders occurred.
Meg was a big part of the planning and execution of the plan at her parents' house. What we also learned is that they had been planning this 3 months prior to the murders before they did it. We believed at this time that Meg and Bill Meese were the ones responsible for the murders. We had ruled out Regina and Randy Appleton at this time. It was a bombshell for us to learn that information. I couldn't believe it. Totally unexpected.
Ten years after Joe, Beth, and Dennis Wellnitz were shot in cold blood, police now believe Meg Wellnitz wanted her parents dead and asked her friend Bill Meese to kill them.
Based upon my prior history with Meg Wellnitz, I would have never dreamed that she would have been involved in that murder of her parents and sibling. She had become that type of person, not the one that I knew from before. And now all of a sudden I see her in a completely different light when she has no compassion for life.
Before they can lay charges, detectives need hard evidence against Meg and Bill.
One of the things that we learned during the investigation, they had purchased a 9mm high-power Browning automatic. We knew they had done that. They used a false ID, and they used it to make the purchase of the gun. We were able to learn that through a report from ATF, and we actually identified who sold that gun to them, and that the person that sold it to them actually identified Meg and Bill as being the ones that came in.
On February 27, 2003, detectives finally have the evidence they need.
This case was presented to an Adair County grand jury, and the grand jury indicted both Meg Wellnitz and Bill Meese.
Meg is arrested at her home in Lexington, but refuses to speak to police. Bill, who is serving a 12-year sentence for the murder for hire plot, is ready to talk.
During his statement, he certainly indicated to us Meg Wellnitz was involved in the planning. This was done at her urging. This was her idea, and that she wanted it done.
We agreed that she wanted to have her parents killed. She claimed the estate was worth $1 million. She would give me 10% of that estate in exchange for killing her parents.
We had the motivation being money. What we learned was that Meg and Bill drove from Lexington that morning down to Columbia, and that Meg gave Bill the key to the front door. She stays in the car. She does not go into the house.
I walked through the house, the back room. Joe came out of the back room. I engaged him, fired on him. He came toward me and I continued firing. He fell. I went upstairs, into the hall. Elizabeth was standing next to her bed. I engaged and fired on her. She fell. I came back down the hall. I entered Dennis's grave. He was sitting on his back. I engaged him. I emptied the magazine of weapons. He was still sitting up at that time. He broke one down the floor, got on the floor, and shot him in the back. I then went into the back bedroom and into the closet. I got the firebox, took the box down the car, took off the clothes I was wearing. I put all those items, as well as the firearm, 3 magazines, in a black plastic trash bag. I put the black trash bag in the trash container and drove back to that. We got back to like about 6:30 or 7:30.
It truly was a chilling account of just how cold-hearted he was, not only in doing it, but in talking about it.
Police confront Meg with Bill's confession.
She agreed to then give a statement. When we met with Meg, my observation and my perception of her demeanor and her statements to us certainly was not one of any remorse. It was a matter-of-fact description of what she had done some years prior in having her family killed.
I don't think I could have ever thought of Meg committing a murder or being a part of a murder plan. I know that life insurance might seem like a lot of money, but when you put that cost on lives, it's nothing. Like it's unfathomable to think that she considered their lives that invaluable.
Bill Meese was convicted by a jury of 3 counts of murder, robbery, and burglary, and he was sentenced to death. Meg Wellnitz was convicted of complicity to 3 counts of murder, complicity to robbery, and complicity to burglary, and she received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years.
It's very disturbing to know that this little sweet girl that I remember has been the one that actually played such a big role in this murder. Meg orchestrated one of the most horrendous crimes that you could imagine, killing your mom and dad and also your brother.
I do not think that Meg receiving 25 years was a just sentence. I think she was as guilty as Bill Meese, and I think she should have been given the same type of sentence as Bill Meese, death.
For their daughter to have been the killer was about the most unexpected thing. It was such a shock to try to wrap your head around how could a daughter carry out or be the mastermind. It does not get any more heartless than that, and it does not get any more sickening than that. She didn't deserve to ever be free again.
In 2014, having served 8 years of her life sentence, Meg is found dead in her cell of an apparent suicide.
I certainly could never have imagined that things would have turned out this way. I just feel sad that Joe wasn't able to live out his life the way that he deserved to and continue to give back to the community that he was a part of, and be a father to Dennis and to Meg even. I wish I had gotten to spend more time with him.
It's just hard to understand sometimes why things happen and why they had to lose their lives in that way when they had so much ahead of them. It was a very tragic ending.
The community lost a cherished family. I mean, we miss them as friends. We miss them as part of the community. They were just fine folks.
A brilliant scientist and devoted family man.
Eugene was a beautiful person.
He definitely wanted to change the world for the better.
Found viciously beaten to death.
32 lacerations to the face and body.
He had suffered a crushed trachea.
Police uncover a trail of evidence and search for a brutal killer.
The volume of blood told the story of how far the struggle went.
There were numerous items of evidence seized.
Several suspects emerge.
We did receive tips that it was a professional hit. He was doing work that might have threatened someone enough that they murdered him.
I knew him to be someone who would maybe not want to cross.
Until the case takes a jaw-dropping turn.
And then a bombshell was dropped.
We thought that we were really onto something, and that kind of fell apart.
And the truth is revealed.
You're telling a family that you've arrested the right people.
We were back to square one.
She wasn't telling us all this stuff out of the goodness of her heart.
It just didn't sound like it could be possible.
Norwich is a small city in eastern Connecticut, known as the Rose of New England.
The city of Norwich is an old mill town. It's not as affluent as the rest of Connecticut. There's poverty here, you know, there's hard luck here. But overall, it's a good city. It's one of those places that doesn't change much.
But on the night of May 14th, 2004, Norwich was shaken to its core by a horrible crime.
911. I was coming here to look at an apartment and there's someone laying on the ground. He's not moving and he looks like he's dead.
Police and paramedics race to the scene.
They found a white male in his 50s. There was a lot of blood. It was a horrific scene. The paramedic indicated that the unresponsive person was deceased. Upon arrival at the scene, we could tell that there was a vicious beating with numerous strikes to the face with some unknown object.
He had suffered quite a lot of injuries to his face and neck. And there was a pattern on his clothing. It looked like it may have been shoe impressions.
There may have been a case of someone either stepping or stomping upon the victim.
The victim's shoes were missing, a wallet, and some other items were missing that he would have normally had.
The missing items suggest a robbery. But what explains the viciousness of the attack?
The volume of blood told the story of how far the struggle went from the side of the house to a car parked in the driveway. The violent struggle had moved throughout the backyard to the location where the body was found. There's always a possibility that it was a random crime, but the manner of death did raise our suspicions about it being possibly more of a personal nature.
The forensic team gets to work.
They collected the blood, hair, fiber, evidence, anything that they could find at the scene.
But this crime scene poses unique challenges for investigators.
The property itself appeared to have been in the process of being cleaned up.
There was a lot of debris. There was broken glass, and there was metal, there was, bike parts.
It was difficult to see if any of that material had anything to do with the crime scene. We did not determine the murder weapon at the scene.
There were numerous items of evidence seized.
We saw a hose in the backyard that had blood on it. A keychain was found at the scene and a brick with some apparent blood residue. The situation with the house told us that the victim was not residing in the house.
Detectives turned to the 911 caller for a statement.
She said she had seen a for rent sign, and she called the number.
The woman who answered said that her husband, the owner, was at the house.
She says, "Oh yeah, my husband's down there working on the property. We should go talk to him."
So she went to the property and discovered the body in the driveway. She dialed 911 at approximately 10:55 p.m.
Police now believe the victim is the owner of the rental property, New Hampshire resident Eugene Maloff.
I conveyed that information to the New Hampshire police, and they were able to notify Joanne Maloff that we had discovered someone that appeared to be her husband.
I received a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from Joanne. And she said, Eugene's been murdered. And it just didn't sound like it could be possible, like it was a bad dream. It just rocked my world.
"56-year-old Eugene Maloff was born and raised in Norwich.
Eugene and I were very close, all through grade school, high school. We just loved each other's company. He was just a down-to-earth, sensitive, nice guy.
Okay, come on. Joey. Let's do our standard dance.
Eugene and his wife Joanne were married young and soon after started a family.
Joanne was made for Eugene. They were both very outgoing and had a lot of warmth. Eugene was always very loving to the kids, just very gregarious and sweet. We knew from a very, very young age that he was a genius.
He got his education from Harvard and then MIT, and he had a doctorate in environmental engineering.
He wrote books about outer space and nuclear energy. There aren't many people like him who can both understand the science and communicate the science.
After completing his PhD, Eugene embraced cold fusion, a controversial theory about limitless energy.
Gene got deeply involved in cold fusion, which was contrary to a lot of conventional thought at the time. If cold fusion realizes its potential, you would have unlimited alternative energy. Gene definitely wanted to change the world for the better.
Gene was trying to follow his dream and go on the path less chosen, and he was working on new ways that we could stop global warming and have a better world.
All right, there we are. But that's our little house.
Eugene always told his parents that he wanted them to keep the house in Norwich. He was sentimental and he just loved those old memories.
Now, the house that held Eugene's fondest memories had become the scene of his family's worst nightmare.
That was the house that he grew up in, and although he moved to New Hampshire, he had kept the family property and had rented it out for years.
Detectives call Eugene's wife, Joanne, and question her about her husband's last known movements.
She said on this particular day, he'd come down to clean up the property, making sure that it was all suitable for renters. And he had a dumpster delivered. Joanne Maloff had spoken to her husband earlier that afternoon, and in fact, she had expected he would be home in New Hampshire by 9 o'clock or so that evening.
Police learned that Eugene had driven his minivan to Norwich that day.
She described the van, and it had some unique markings on it, and also had New Hampshire plates. Mrs. Maloff said the van should have been on the property.
But there was no van in the driveway.
The first thing you're thinking of is that the killer had taken off with Mr. Maloff's van.
He's a family man murdered and brutally beaten. I think that shocks the conscience of any neighborhood.
We felt that whoever was driving that van was complicit with the homicide of Dr. Maloff.
Coming up, investigators uncover conflicting evidence.
They had been involved in a theft of a motor vehicle and some kind of violent struggle.
Blood was sent to the laboratory, but there was no match. It wasn't logical.
And disturbing secrets.
I realized that there were people out there that weren't happy with Gene.
Whose blood is that and where did it come from?
He wanted to commit suicide and was shaking and hyperventilating.
Some of the things regarding her whereabouts on the night of the murder hadn't added up.
I had to accept it, but it was a terrible thing.
Nuclear scientist Eugene Maloff has been found violently beaten to death at the rental property he owns. And police suspect the killer fled in his van.
We put out a bolo, be on the lookout, to all the local police departments for the van.
While detectives wait for news on the van, they interview neighbors.
The purpose of the neighborhood canvas to try and figure out when was the last time Mr. Maloff was seen alive.
We spoke to a neighborhood friend of Dr. Maloff. He indicated that he had seen him mowing the lawn earlier that day, and nothing was suspicious at the time. He did indicate that at about 8:30 p.m. that evening, the van was not there, which gave us a time frame to start working with.
Dr. Maloff had been mowing the lawn. Everything had grass cuttings covering it, from abandoned bicycles and debris on the ground, but there wasn't a stitch of grass on these keys. So we believe that those keys were dropped after Dr. Maloff had mowed the lawn, which would have been sometime around the time of the homicide.
Detectives hope neighbors can help them identify the owner of the keys. But then, police receive an urgent call from a local casino.
We were notified that Dr. Maloff's van had been located in the employee parking lot of the Foxwoods Casino, which was approximately 7 miles away from the crime scene. When we arrived, the tailpipe was cold as if it had been there for several hours. The van was towed back to the City of Norwich Public Works Garage so that the State Police Major Crime Unit could process the van.
They searched the van for hairs, fibers, and anything that looked like blood.
They didn't obtain any fingerprints from the door handles or steering wheel, which indicated to us that the driver quite possibly was wearing gloves.
Investigators hope security footage will help them identify the driver of Eugene's van.
It was a hazy, foggy evening, and we weren't able to gather much evidence at all from the cameras at the Foxwoods Casino.
With the killer still at large, police turn their attention to Eugene's wife, Joanne, in New Hampshire.
Probably a 3-hour drive from New Hampshire to the crime scene. The Maloff family, they had alibis, and they were not suspects at this time. Joanne Maloff couldn't provide anybody's name that would have any intention of hurting her husband.
Police asked Joanne for information about recent tenants at Eugene's rental property in Norwich.
We needed to obtain the identity of all individuals that had lived in the house. They were definitely persons of interest. Joanne Maloff told us that Gene had evicted Pat and Roy Anderson approximately 2 weeks prior to the murder.
Gene's tenants stopped paying the rent, and Eugene eventually had to look into how to get them out, because I think they were there for a good 6 months before they actually left. Gene didn't want to be cruel to people, and I think he really gave them a lot of leeway, but enough is enough.
For detectives, it's the first break in the investigation.
Pat and Roy Anderson had been living at Mr. Maloff's property for a long period of time, up till the eviction.
My immediate questions were, where are the people that were evicted? How do we locate the Andersons?
Luckily, a tip from a neighbor leads police to the Andersons' son, Chad Schaefer, who lives nearby with his girlfriend, Candace Foster.
One of the investigators went to their apartment to get information about Chad's mom and dad, Pat and Roy.
The purpose of his interview was to determine whether or not the Andersons had seen Gene Maloff on the property, if they'd seen him, when they had last seen him.
Chad claims that his parents had not seen Eugene since he served them the eviction notice.
Chad Schaefer said there were no hard feelings between the Andersons and Gene Maloff.
Police asked Chad for his whereabouts on the night of the murder.
Chad and Candace indicated that they were both home with their newborn on the night in question, and that was their alibi.
Chad cooperates with police and provides them with his parents' new address.
I subsequently went out to Pat and Roy Anderson's new rental out in Montville, Connecticut, and interviewed them about Gene's death. Pat Anderson, she corroborated Chad Schaefer's assessment that when they were evicted, they moved on, and there was no feelings of animosity between themselves and Gene Maloff.
Detectives still want to know where the Andersons were at the time of the murder.
Patricia Anderson worked in a nursing home. Ian said she was at home after working previously during the day.
Police ask Roy point blank if he has an alibi around the time that Eugene was murdered.
He indicated that he had worked from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning out at the Foxwoods Casino. And Dr. Maloff's van had been located in the employee parking lot of the Foxwoods Casino.
That was very suspicious to the investigator. From the crime scene to the Foxwoods Casino parking lot is not far, a 15-minute drive. And then you're thinking maybe this eviction thing was a personal thing. And you have as investigators to figure out who did it so that person can be held accountable.
Police investigating the murder of cold fusion scientist Eugene Maloff now have their first real suspect. His recently evicted tenant, Roy Anderson, works at the same casino where Eugene's stolen van was found on the night of the murder.
Roy reported that there was no animosity about the eviction. There was no problem between Eugene and Roy. But Dr. Maloff's van had been found at the Foxwoods lot.
Angered by the eviction, had Roy killed Eugene in revenge?
We got a list of names of employees that night, and we verified that Roy Anderson was in fact working from 5 p.m. until 1 a.m., and that provided him with a pretty solid alibi that he was not within the city of Norwich at all. Pat and Roy Anderson were both individuals of interest, but they had alibis.
Police want to know if anyone else was living in their house at the time of the eviction.
One of the things that we learned in talking to Pat and Roy, they would bring other people in to help pay for rooms.
We needed to obtain the location of all individuals that lived in the house.
It turns out one of the Anderson subletters is well known to police.
Lenny Campbell was a friend of Roy's, and they allowed Lenny to stay in the basement of the house.
I personally had run into him a few times during the course of my patrol duties. I knew him to be an individual that someone would maybe not want to cross. The Andersons, when they were evicted, Lenny moved out with them to their new place.
Police want to speak to Lenny, but the Andersons say he recently packed up and left without an explanation.
He moved out shortly after Eugene's murder, and investigators thought it was suspicious.
When police try to track Lenny down, they find he's moved out of state.
Lenny Campbell was working on a farm up in Massachusetts. Lenny denied ever even having contact with Eugene Maloff.
Lenny isn't talking, and there's no evidence connecting him to the crime scene.
At this point in the investigation, we really need some solid forensic evidence that somebody was complicit in the murder of Eugene Maloff.
Police receive the autopsy report, and it sheds more light on how Eugene was killed.
The medical examiner's office indicated approximately 32 lacerations to the face and body.
And he had suffered a crushed trachea.
What possibly could have sparked such a vicious assault?
We did receive tips throughout the course of the investigation saying that it was a professional hit.
Was Eugene assassinated for his research into alternative energy?
I thought that perhaps because cold fusion was so controversial, that maybe it was some kind of planned setup.
I do believe there's always a danger to somebody that's going to rock the boat. I realized that Gene's passion for countering big oil meant that there were plenty of people out there that weren't happy with Gene.
It occurred to me that, he was doing work that might have threatened someone enough that they would have murdered him.
We delved into it, and based on the crime scene and the circumstances in which he was killed, I don't think a professional hitman would go about his business in that manner. It just didn't add up. It wasn't logical.
Police are running out of leads, but then a witness comes forward with a bizarre account from the night of the murder.
We came in contact with a shuttle driver for a nearby hotel sometime between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. on the night of the murder. He had pulled up to a traffic light and saw a van similar to the doctor's van, and he noticed the operator of the van, a white male, was wearing socks on his hands.
Obviously, you start to think, well, if the person's wearing socks on their hands, they don't want to transfer any evidence onto a steering wheel.
Whoever was driving that van with hands covered with socks was possibly complicit with the homicide. Gene Maloff's van had been moved into a fenced-in compound, and we examined it again for anything that we may have missed or the state police may have missed, and we seized a few items to include a plastic bag.
Police submit the bag to the state forensic lab for analysis.
And as a result of that, a fingerprint came back. It was the first piece of evidence that would place somebody in that van, possibly on the night of the murder.
The print is run through the police database.
The fingerprint belonged to a local individual from the Norwich area.
When we ran this person's record, they had a record of burglaries.
He was the type of guy that wouldn't have any problems breaking into your car. Maybe Eugene Maloff got killed for it.
Police have a fresh lead in the murder of Eugene Maloff. A fingerprint on a plastic bag found in the scientist's stolen van is matched to a local car burglar.
The results of that examination indicated that a print on the bag belonged to a Nicholas Gardner.
Police track the suspect down and bring him in for questioning.
He was very nonchalant about the fact that he had broken into the van, but when it was brought to his attention that that vehicle was used following a homicide, his demeanor shifted dramatically, and he became very nervous at that point.
When police grill him further, he makes a startling admission.
He said that he broke into a police impound lot.
He explained that he had broken into the impound lot and was burglarizing the cars. And that would explain how his fingerprints had been found in Mr. Maloff's van.
Police confirm his story when his prints are found on other vehicles in the lot.
Nicholas was definitely wrong place, wrong time, and had no clue that the van that he was entering was involved in the homicide of Gene Maloff.
Nicholas is charged with the burglaries, but it's a dead end in the search for Eugene's killer. Then, police get a call that reignites the case.
We received a phone call from the New Britain Police Department, 40 minutes away from the city of Norwich. A New Britain police officer had come in contact with two subjects. They were in a parking lot. They were asleep in the vehicle. It was a stolen vehicle. It had been reported stolen the same night of Dr. Maloff's murder.
When the officer looked inside the car, he made an alarming discovery.
They had been found with blood inside their vehicle. And so obviously the first inclination is, whose blood is that and where did it come from?
The men are arrested and taken to the station.
When they were taken into custody, they were identified as Joseph Riley and Gary McAvoy. Officers at the scene observed that Riley and McAvoy had evidence of some kind of violent struggle.
Is it possible these two men were involved in Eugene's murder?
We wanted to either rule them into our homicide scene or rule them out.
So investigators from Norwich went up and spoke with Riley and McAvoy at the lockup in New Britain.
Police interview Riley and McAvoy in separate rooms. They press Riley about the bloodstains in the car and scratches on his arms and legs.
Joe Riley told the detectives that he and McAvoy ended up in an altercation with one another.
They both said that they got into a fight in the car, and that's how they had the blood in the car.
Investigators question the pair about Eugene's homicide.
During Riley's interview, he made some statements that really caught our attention. He asked, did the old man get the kicked out of him? But the manner of death of Gene Maloff had not been relayed to Riley at that time.
How did Riley seem to know details about how Eugene was killed? McAvoy's response to questioning raises more red flags.
When the officer advised him that he was being investigated for potential homicide, Gary McAvoy became very distraught. He indicated that he wanted to commit suicide, and at one point curled up in a fetal position on the floor and was shaking and hyperventilating.
The statements provided by Riley and McAvoy were suspicious to the investigators.
Police bring in the hotel shuttle driver who claimed he saw someone driving Eugene's van on the night of the murder.
He told us that the operator of the van was a white male.
A photo array was offered to the witness, and he pointed out to Joseph Riley as the driver of the minivan that he saw that night.
Police now have a witness placing one of their suspects inside Eugene Maloff's van on the night he was murdered.
Riley and McAvoy had been involved in a theft of a motor vehicle and a burglary, and they did have evidence of a violent struggle, and the witness picks Riley out of a photo lineup.
Police still lack physical evidence, so they obtain the men's DNA to compare to samples collected from the crime scene and the van.
Evidence was sent up to the Connecticut State Police Forensic Laboratory.
When results come back, it's a major break.
We received a phone call from the forensic lab saying that the hair in Mr. Maloff's van was a match to Mr. McAvoy. Okay, well, that's a blockbuster.
We had solid forensic evidence, and we're going to move forward with a warrant.
Riley and McAvoy are charged with Eugene's murder.
I was happy for the family that maybe they'd get some closure on this case.
But then, investigators receive a disturbing call.
We thought we were on strong footing based on the solid forensic evidence from the van, and the case was going to move forward. And then a bombshell was dropped.
Joseph Riley and Gary McAvoy are charged for the murder of Eugene Maloff after one of McAvoy's hairs is matched to a hair found in Eugene's van. But then, police receive news that rocks the case.
Bombshell was dropped by the state forensic lab. The lab reached out to us and said there was a mistake, and that McAvoy's hair was not at the crime scene and were not in the van.
There was a clerical error at the laboratory.
And somewhere at the lab, there was confusion over the item numbers. So the hair fiber they tested, they thought came from the van, in fact, came from the hair of the suspects up in prison. And as a result, the state of Connecticut decided they were not going to pursue homicide charges against Riley or McAvoy.
We thought that we were really onto something, and that kind of fell apart.
At this point, we were back to square one.
You're telling a family who lost a loved one to violent crime that you've arrested the right people, and that falls apart. And then we say to the Maloff family, I'm sorry, we couldn't do better.
I had to accept it, but it was a terrible thing. I would cry on the way to work, and I think when you go through a tragedy, your world becomes very small. Joanne was very upset, and I saw her break down once when we were going someplace. I was following her, and she lost her way. She just was devastated at that point.
When the investigation went on so long, I had a feeling it was just one of those random events, and we would never learn anything more of it. I think I pretty much accepted that.
The case goes cold. Then, 4 years after the murder of Eugene Maloff, the investigation is rebooted. Determined to solve the crime, Norwich PD assigned new resources to the case.
They put a task force together, and I was assigned to work with the state's attorney's office along with Detective Terry McFadden.
Detective Curtis and I picked up on the case and basically started from day one.
Cold cases are just cases that take longer to solve than others. It was a fresh start, and it let us get to work on finding out who the real killers were.
We had met with the Malov family and just told them that we were trying to get justice for Eugene, and we were able to secure a reward for information about Mr. Malov's homicide, and that's not typically seen in every homicide.
The reward is advertised on a large billboard near the interstate.
We worked with the family, and we came up with the best design possible and put a billboard up where we thought that the most people would see Eugene's face and see our message to the public saying we needed help with this investigation.
After just a few weeks, the billboard starts to bring results.
The day I won't forget in this case is when we had a witness come into the police department and explain to me that they had direct information related to the death of Eugene Malov.
The witness claims to know Candace Foster and Chad Schaefer. Chad is the son of the Andersons, the tenants Eugene evicted.
Jill Sebastian was friends with Candace Foster and Chad Schaefer, and had actually lived with them around that time of Mr. Malov's murder. She began to tell us about how when they would see reports about Mr. Malov's murder on the TV, Chad would start getting kind of antsy. And Candace had mentioned to Jill about Chad coming home with bloody clothing around the time of Mr. Malov's murder.
Investigators are stunned by Jill's statement, but police have no evidence connecting Chad Schaefer to the crime scene.
Early in the investigation, an investigator went to Chad and Candace. They said that on the night of the murder, they had stayed home and there's no evidence to support any connection to Eugene's death.
Police are eager to corroborate Jill's story. Her boyfriend, Keyshawn, agrees to give a statement.
Keyshawn told us that Chad Schaefer confessed to Keyshawn that he had killed Eugene Malov.
Obviously, it's a significant development in the case. We started to look at Candace Foster and Chad more closely.
Police learned that in the years after the murder, Chad and Candace had separated. They focused their attention on Candace.
The number one goal for us was to get information from her regarding Chad, being a participant in the murder of Dr. Eugene Malov.
Police urge Candace to tell them everything she knows.
This is the father of her children that she's now going to be telling us about that participated in a homicide. Candace and Chad had a tumultuous relationship, and she related to us that her biggest fear for her and her children was Chad.
Detectives asked Candace about a piece of physical evidence that could tie Chad to the crime scene.
Candace told us that those keys had been hanging inside the loft at the apartment where Candace and Chad lived, and we happened to find a key ring similar at the crime scene.
The information is damning, but investigators suspect that Candace is hiding something.
Some of the things that Candace had said regarding Chad or regarding her whereabouts on the night of the murder hadn't added up. We had to let Candace know that she would have to come clean and explain to us everything she knew about the murder.
When we interviewed her, a little bit of information would come out, and then a little bit more information would come out. And then it reached a point where Candace did tell us someone other than Chad was involved in Mr. Malov's murder.
Detectives believe Eugene Maloff was killed by his former tenant's son, Chad Schaefer. But Chad's ex-girlfriend, Candace, claims Chad wasn't the only one involved in the brutal murder.
Candace told us that Moselle Brown, he had been at the scene with Chad at the time of Mr. Maloff's murder. Moselle Brown was the cousin of Chad Schaefer.
Chad had been hanging around with Moselle a little bit more often around this time. Moselle Brown had a violent criminal past. We knew of him. We were cautious of him.
Investigators press Candace for more details about events leading up to Eugene's murder. She says it all started when a relative saw Eugene cleaning out the rental unit the Andersons had been evicted from.
Candace told us that all day long, Chad had been getting phone calls from his mom, Patricia Anderson, saying that the landlord was throwing all their things in the garbage. Patricia was really upset and starts putting out pressure on Chad. I told you, you were supposed to get that stuff out of there. You were supposed to have that house cleaned out. I want my belongings. And Chad had gotten picked up by Moselle Brown.
He told Moselle that Mr. Maloff was throwing stuff out that belonged to Chad's parents. They got upset.
And they go over there and they say, listen, we're not going to take it from this guy. Mr. Maloff says, no, get out of here. I gave you plenty of time to get your stuff out of here, leave. And someone throws a punch. They hit him once, and now once they hit him, these guys don't stop. They just start beating him. And they leave him for dead.
Following the vicious assault, the pair returned to Chad and Candace's apartment.
Candace told us that they returned. And Chad was upset, and Chad had blood on his clothing. And Chad explained to Candace that they had beaten the landlord.
But Candace's account doesn't explain how Eugene's van ended up in the casino parking lot.
Candace wasn't telling us all this stuff out of the goodness of her heart. She was doing this to minimize her involvement and minimize her punishment.
When investigators confront her about her deception, she finally cracks.
From what Candace was telling us, it looked like three of them were involved. Chad Schaefer, Moselle Brown, and Candace Foster.
Candace says she returned to the rental property with Chad and Moselle to cover up their crime.
Candace said they walked down the path to the garage to where they saw Eugene Maloff laying on the ground, and that he was still alive and still breathing, but he was severely beaten. And they realized they gotta kill him.
Candace Foster was a bit reluctant to do that, at which point they threatened her.
Chad and Moselle said if she didn't participate, that she'd be next.
It was a vicious beating with numerous strikes to the face with some unknown object.
And at that point, Eugene's still alive. And that's when Moselle steps on his throat until he stops breathing.
After killing Eugene, Chad, Moselle, and Candace staged the scene to throw police off their trail.
They wanted to make this look like it was a robbery, and part of that was that Candace drove the van and dropped it off in the casino parking lot.
With Candace's story, investigators believe they have enough evidence to charge Chad and Moselle with murder. They arrest Chad Schaefer first.
When the news came through that they actually had an arrest, it was a shock to find out that Gene was killed by a son of a disgruntled tenant. It just seemed unfair.
When investigators track down Moselle Brown, they find out he's serving time in Ohio for another crime.
We extradited him back to Connecticut to face charges for the killing of Eugene Maloff. I believe the X factor was Moselle. He was the violent ringleader, and I believe Chad Schaefer and Candace Foster would not have killed Eugene Maloff. in the absence of Moselle.
The three accused are tried separately.
Moselle received more than 50 years in prison. At Chad's trial, he was defiant and ultimately took a plea deal and took the offer that the state put on the table.
Chad Schaefer agrees to plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter.
Chad Schaefer received a 25-year sentence, and he would have to serve 17 and a half years.
Candace Foster is the last to face justice.
There's no way that we could have had as strong a case that we did against Moselle and Chad without Candace. And Candace, with her attorney, made an arrangement with the state's attorney's office for her to receive the sentence that she got.
Candace eventually was charged with hindering prosecution and tampering with evidence.
She served 3 years in jail and then several years of probation.
The verdicts bring closure, but nothing can replace what Jean's loved ones have lost.
I'm not a good judge as to whether justice was served, but the bottom line was that we couldn't bring back that special, wonderful man.
I think Jean would like to be remembered as somebody that advanced the deeper knowledge of the universe.
I think Jean did make a difference in the world. I think he could have made a much bigger difference had he been around longer.
I just miss Jean, and I really relish all the memories I have of all the happy times. We all loved him so much. The world has lost a great human being, a great mind, and a beautiful person.
A dedicated family man.
He was the best grandpa I could ever ask for my kids.
He loved his family. He was always there for everyone.
And a pillar of the community.
He helped a lot of the people who were down on their luck.
He was changing everyone's life.
Is senselessly murdered.
We noticed what looked like burn marks.
Is this a torture type crime? Was he actually tortured?
Detectives follow a trail of evidence.
I noticed my dad's truck was gone.
We knew that this truck was a key to solving this homicide.
That reveals devastating betrayals.
Marty would employ people from drug rehab centers.
You look at him and you're thinking that if anybody could do it, this guy could do it.
Then a surprise lead reveals a killer no one imagined.
I've told you guys everything I know.
No, you haven't. We're pretty excited. We're just about to go nuts. It was a moment, I'll say that.
I never thought he would do something like that.
He's not the guy I would have picked to have committed this crime.
I was in complete shock.
Ardmore, Oklahoma is an honest, hardworking town built on family values.
We're a town of about 25,000 people, and it's a wonderful community.
It's a great place to live because you can have that large town feel and then yet come home to the small town atmosphere as well.
On the evening of November 15th, 2019, that small town feeling is shattered when police respond to a 911 call.
I had just sat down to eat when the phone rang, and it was dispatch advising me that officers were out on a possible homicide.
Police are checking in on a local man who hasn't been seen or heard from in several days.
They arrived, immediately looked in the window, could see the victim was laying face down in the floor, and they could see blood, so they forced their way into the residence. They knew immediately that he was deceased.
Minutes later, homicide detectives arrive at the scene.
The living room was just in disarray. There was items kicked over. There was blood on the couch. There was blood spatter on nearby items in the living room, the TV and pictures. And so we knew that there was a struggle that had taken place in that room.
When the detectives look at the body, they recognize the dead man.
I knew the victim. It was Marty Lucas. Most of the police officers knew who Marty was. Marty helped in the community. He helped a lot of the people who were down on their luck. Marty was a nice guy.
Detectives have to determine why 63-year-old Marty Lucas would be the target of such a heinous crime.
With the amount of trauma that Marty had suffered, it was a pretty violent, bloody scene.
You can see a lot of blood that has pooled around the body. You can see blood on the back of the body, on the head, and we knew that this was a death as a result of a beating or a blunt force trauma.
It's obvious that there was quite a struggle. Marty had hair in his hands. He had abrasions on his hands. I think he fought for his life. We noticed that there were pieces of what appeared to be a rock that had some moss on them. We found parts of it over by the couch where there was a large blood stain, and then parts of it over by him. We walked the exterior of the residence trying to find where maybe a rock would have come from. Immediately under the carport, there is a rock pathway. The walkway was missing a rock. So immediately we thought, well, whoever it was that did this took a rock from there and brought it with him. That indicated to us that this was premeditated.
And so we believe that he or she had used it as a weapon against Marty, and in the process of that, it was broken. We didn't find very large pieces of it, and so we believe that the majority of that rock was taken from the scene.
Police discover unusual markings on the body.
We noticed what looked like burn marks on his shirt, like his shirt had been ironed. My initial reaction was not only has he been hit by an iron, he's been burned by an iron.
Is this a torture type crime? Was he actually tortured? And so we believe maybe early on that the iron could have been a murder weapon, or at least an additional murder weapon in this case.
But what could have been the motive for such a violent attack?
Where his wallet would have been, someone had reached in and taken his wallet, because you could see the blood transfer, a handprint, like sliding down into his pants almost.
We were pretty clear that this was a crime involving a robbery and theft. His wallet was missing along with his phones.
Detectives make one more important observation.
We thought whoever had killed Marty knew him because there wasn't a sign of forced entry.
As investigators work, Marty's son Michael arrives at the scene.
I went to his house. It was a nightmare. It's the worst day of my life. I was in shock once I seen what was actually inside.
My husband called me. He said, my dad's dead. Someone killed him. And he was just screaming in my ear. He's like, I can't believe someone would kill my dad. I was in complete shock. He was such a nice person. Who would want to hurt him?
Marty Lucas was born into a military family in 1956. After graduating high school, Marty got married and had 2 children, Jennifer and Michael.
Michael and his dad were very, very close.
He loved his family. He was always there for everyone, you know. He made sure to make time for everyone. I used to call him Papa Smurf because he's just really funny. He's short. He's just a real, you know, bubbly person. My parents, they divorced when I was pretty young.
Marty had struggles when my husband was a child and a teenager.
He had a substance abuse problem.
He had been in and out of trouble with the police, petty crimes that was a result of that addiction.
In 2007, Marty got a second chance when he was offered a job as a carpenter and found renewed purpose in life.
From then on, he straightened up and started his own business. Did really well.
He turned his life around. He was one of the few success stories that I'm aware of in my career.
Marty threw everything into rebuilding his life and his family.
He taught me a lot of work-related skills at an early age. He let me start working with him when I was 12 years old. And my son, he's 8. He's already starting working him, basically, showing him skills like he did me when I was young.
He was the best grandpa I could ever ask for my kids.
Marty never forgot the second chance he'd been given and vowed to pay it forward.
Marty would usually go to the halfway houses and get people that had just got out of jail or that have a hard time with their life and see if they would want to work for him.
Basically, just giving workers second chances. He knew where they was coming from. He's been in their shoes.
He taught these men and women new skills. He treated them with the utmost respect.
Now investigators are left asking, who would want to bludgeon this well-respected contractor and caring grandfather to death?
He really had no enemies. days. And just to see that the way that he died was so brutal, it was very difficult to know that someone would be capable of doing something like that.
As detectives finish up at the crime scene, they turn to Marty's son, who gives them a crucial lead.
When I showed up, I noticed that my dad's truck was gone. That really threw me off because he wouldn't even let me drive his truck. He wouldn't loan the truck out to no one.
It was a Chevy pickup that originally had belonged to Marty's father. That truck was everything to him.
Detectives put out a bolo, or be on the lookout for the missing truck.
We needed to find the truck and maybe hope that either the suspect was still driving it or that they left behind evidence that we could identify.
We knew that this truck was a key to solving this homicide.
Investigators ask Marty's loved ones who they think would have seen him last.
We found out that Marty had been missing 2 or 3 days prior to the Friday the 15th that we found his body. And one of the things we were told by family and friends is that Marty goes to this Valero gas station every morning to get coffee.
The Valero had video that pointed down the street that the crime occurred on.
The manager said that Marty had arrived last at that store on Tuesday morning.
Detectives searched the security footage. On the day after Marty was last seen alive, and 3 days before his body was found, the truck appears.
Marty's truck was very unique, dark green color with custom wheels. This green truck was in a big hurry and it pulled out in front of a semi-truck and it was almost in an accident that we had captured on video.
Investigators need to track down Marty's truck and whoever is behind the wheel.
We thought if we find the truck, we're probably going to find our suspect. This is going to be our guy.
Coming up, detectives uncover suspects with dark pasts.
They said he's violent. I thought, good Lord, he gets violent. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
She had frequented a lot of the local casinos.
She knew he had large sums of cash.
This was the break that we needed.
And the trail leads to an unlikely killer.
You're not gonna think that this is someone who could kill somebody. That kind of broke open a whole new layer of the case.
The investigation took off at warp speed because we think we've got our guy.
Police investigating the murder of 63-year-old contractor Marty Lucas have obtained gas station surveillance video of someone driving his truck the day after he was last seen.
We collected hours and hours of video from the store. We were able to piece together some events that happened before and after the homicide.
The footage shows a busy street a few blocks from Marty's house. When detectives scour the rest of the security tapes, something grabs their attention.
On Wednesday morning, just after daylight, you can see a gentleman walking from the direction of Motel 6, and that person was walking towards Marty's home.
Is this unidentified man involved in Marty's murder?
You can see the suspect. Then an hour later, you can see on the video that there's one guy in the truck, that there's a single person in the truck.
And so we thought he might be the same person that was in that video. Marty did not allow just anyone to drive this truck. In fact, he did not allow anyone to drive this truck. We had to follow the stolen truck. That was really going to be our key to solving this case.
While officers continue their search for the truck, detectives return to speak to Marty's family and friends.
That's one of the things we were trying to just nail down is, who has Marty been hanging out with lately? Who has he been working with? Who has he had problems with, if anyone?
Police learn that along with helping people back up on their feet, Marty often forged friendships with those he employed.
Marty would become close with some of the men that he worked with or that he would hire and try to get to know them.
There's probably about 6 or 7 of them I actually got pretty close to. He built up friendships with them.
Amanda and Jason, Marty's neighbors, were very close to him. Amanda used to work for Marty because she paints very well.
He didn't look down on me for, I was trying to get my life back on track. And he told me he did it, so you can do it.
Marty would bring a lot of these folks to family dinners or get-togethers. He tried to bring them into his family.
But now, police want to know, had Marty's generosity and business exposed him to danger?
He paid all of his people in cash. And that's just the way it is in the day labors with those guys. They need money that day, so they're going to work, and everything's cash.
To know that he could pay them daily with cash and help them out may have led to his demise.
Police also discover not all Marty's employees felt like part of the family.
It wasn't an easy road for Marty because sometimes he would have to tell them that they couldn't work for him anymore because they would steal from him.
Anytime you're working with people who have drug and alcohol problems, it's not uncommon for them to steal from their employers. And Marty had faced some of that. He wasn't afraid to stand up to these people. He would tell them, if you mess up, you're gone.
So our list of suspects was a mile long. We were given several names, but yeah, it was so difficult for investigators because it was going to be hard to track them down. Where they were staying, they usually don't keep jobs very long.
As detectives begin tracking down Marty's current and former employees, they ask his neighbor if anyone had a grudge against him.
Well, I initially went to interview Amanda, and she said, over the last month or so, there's been some rough-looking characters over there.
1 month before his death, he had been hanging out with these new people, and they were helping him work on his truck and then had to redo the job.
She thought maybe there had been some anger issues between the victim and those guys.
The day they were there working, Marty seemed to be pacing back and forth like they were taking too long, and he didn't want to, leave them at his house. They were making too big of a mess. He was upset about that.
Amanda didn't know the men, but had overheard Marty talk to the man in charge.
One was a guy named Junior, and so this was someone that we wanted to speak with.
There's just one problem.
We did not know who Junior was.
We knew this to be probably a nickname, and that's all we really knew.
While detectives plan to search for Junior, Amanda also provides them with the name of another one of Marty's former employees.
Marty met Chris Dyer at a Valero, the local convenience store that he went to nearly every morning to get a cup of coffee. Chris had recently been fired from that store, had a falling out with the owner, and Marty had employed him.
I know Chris Dyer had worked for Marty, had been fired from there for drug use.
He'd had a criminal past. He'd been arrested and had an addiction problem with drugs and alcohol.
Officers speak with the owner of the Valero station where Chris once worked.
The owner-manager of the Valero store reaffirmed that Chris was just not a very good guy, that he had had trouble employing him, and so he felt like that he needed to let Chris go because there was always drama, that Chris was basically just at rock bottom and desperate for money. Chris Dyer knew that Marty carried several $100s. When he paid him for a job, he would pay him at the end of the day, and he would pay him with cash.
Was Chris Dyer desperate enough to bludgeon Marty Lucas to death?
We're thinking that maybe it was a robbery gone bad, knowing that Marty had this money in his home because he was down on his luck and needed money for drugs. And so there was a lot of questions concerning Chris Dyer. One of our main priorities early on in the investigation is to find this subject named Junior, along with Chris Dyer. And so we wanted to talk to these people.
So we need to locate Junior, and we needed to talk to Chris as quickly as possible.
Police investigating the murder of contractor Marty Lucas are chasing multiple leads as they search for his killer and stolen truck. They've set their sights on two of Marty's employees, an unidentified man called Junior and a recently fired laborer named Chris Dyer.
A lot of these folks who are going through tough times, there is nothing permanent in their lives. There is nothing fixed in their lives. There is no stability. And so it was hard to track them down.
Following a lead, police questioned employees at the gas station where Chris had worked.
I spoke with the clerk that was on duty at the Valero, and she was able to give me a phone number to Gina Dyer. Gina is Chris's estranged wife.
She and Chris had been separated about a month because she had caught him cheating. He had gone back to drug use, and that he was currently living at the Econo Lodge Hotel.
Detectives find Chris at the hotel and bring him in for an interview.
We really thought that we had something. We knew that Chris had easy access to Marty's home. Chris Dyer knew that Marty carried up to $500 to $600 in cash on him at any given point in time. So there's a rumor that some rumors went around that maybe you and him had gotten crossways and he had basically fired you. So you never had a disagreement?
No, not at all. Nope. I'd like to know who in the hell's saying that, because that's bullshit. Pardon my French.
Police know better than to trust Chris's word.
We knew that Chris Dyer is down on his luck and had run-ins with the law, and well, maybe this is our killer. This is who it is. And then you get him in an interview room and he's cooperative and he's genuine. In fact, he was very distraught over Marty's death.
I hope you catch who the hell did it and fry their ass.
Yeah, I know, right?
But he was, man, that guy would do anything for anybody. I had some empathy there because he'd been in trouble before too. But, damn sure didn't deserve to go out like that.
I think he considered Marty a friend, even though Marty had fired him.
Would you be willing for us to go through your truck, look through your hotel room, to see if there's anything that would be...
Yeah, I got that.
We can roll you out. Marty had what we would consider defensive wounds to the hands. There was hair and blood under the fingernails of the body. And so we knew that there was some type of altercation. We knew that there had to be injuries on our suspect or suspects. And Chris had none of that. He had no recent cuts or bruises.
In order to officially rule Chris out as a suspect, detectives checked Chris's alibi.
He said he had gone to Kingston, Oklahoma, which is nearby, with Krista, his girlfriend. I believe it was the Wednesday before.
Police bring Krista in for an interview.
Is it possible that he slipped out of the room one night while you were sleeping, left, went and did something?
No, I have to say that just could not be possible.
His girlfriend also corroborated Chris's timeline as to what his story was. He had an alibi for that timeline, but he just didn't appear to be involved.
With nothing to link Chris to the murder, police are forced to let him go. Investigators hope Marty's preliminary autopsy report will provide more leads.
The significant thing for us from the autopsy was the fact the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, including the large gash to his head. Obviously, he was hit with something other than the rock because of the laceration on his head and because of the burn marks.
These burns that was on his back and part of his right arm came back as a post-mortem burns, which was very interesting to us, which means that they were caused after Marty had passed away. Initially, we were looking at these burns to the body as being type of a torture. Now, we believe the iron was used as a secondary weapon after. So the suspect didn't realize that. In his rage, he didn't know that Marty had already died, and he continued to hit him with this iron.
The preliminary autopsy report doesn't conclude whether the rock or iron ultimately killed Marty, and an exact time of death remains undetermined. Meanwhile, with the killer still at large, the worry takes a toll on Marty's family.
His son, Michael's always a quiet person, but he was like a walking zombie.
I couldn't sleep at night. I'd stay up during the day. It's fear for my family. Just because, I had no clue who would do this to my dad.
Michael was really panicked. Marty had so many different men working with him. I was very fearful of my life.
As police continue their search for other suspects, including the former employee, Junior, who worked on Marty's truck, a lead comes in about someone close to Marty who might have had a motive.
One of Marty's friends had called one of our patrol officers and told him that Marty was dating a lady named Donna Hargrave.
So Donna Hargrave is somebody that probably everybody at the Ardmore Police Department is familiar with and knows on site.
We knew Donna had a drug problem as well. She did have a few run-ins with police and frequented a lot of the local casinos.
Could Donna's vices have pushed her to murder Marty?
She knew Marty and knew that he had large sums of cash, and because she is a known drug user, that perhaps she had enlisted the assistance of another known drug user to go rob Marty. That was a scenario obviously had some possibility to it. That's why we needed to talk to Donna as quickly as possible.
Officers bring Donna down to the police department for an interview.
Upon bringing her into the interview room, she was handcuffed, and I knew she had not come up there willingly.
What's this about?
Yes, if I'm not under arrest, then why do y'all have a reason to search me?
She was really uncooperative. She did not want to speak to us.
Okay, what is this about? Please get this over with and tell me what it's about.
Okay, so...
Somebody who I've been hanging with.
Yeah.
Okay, who?
Marty Lucas.
That picture. And that's straight up.
She definitely has a problem with Marty that was very suspicious. And it really struck a nerve in us because we wanted to know what this problem is.
Two days after finding the body of 63-year-old Marty Lucas, police are interviewing his former girlfriend, Donna Hargrave, a woman with a long criminal history and a grudge against Marty.
She had been arrested many times here in Ardmore. She had been known to be at least uncooperative with police, if not somewhat violent and unruly.
She didn't really care too much for Marty. We thought maybe she had something to do with his death.
He pissed me off because he was just being a dickhead.
So when you said F him, what are you mad at him about?
He just promised things and y'all never fall through. Like I talked to Marty about moving my trailer over to him. Over to his house or something. He said no.
He knew that she had not been clean and that she had not been trying to straighten up and that he wasn't going to help her as long as she wasn't trying to help herself.
Could Marty's rejection have led Donna to do something unthinkable?
So if I were to tell you something bad happened to Marty, what would you say?
What do you mean? What's wrong with him?
Well, if I were to tell you he was dead, someone did something to him, what would you say about that?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Where is he?
Yeah, that's why you're here.
This was a girl that was very hardened, and for her to break down and to cry and was very genuinely upset over Marty's death.
She did say that they had recently broken up and that she hadn't seen him anytime in the last 4, 5, 7 days.
Can you kind of start like maybe Wednesday morning, tell me where you were, what you did, where you went?
At my mom's and I slept all day.
Okay.
And we were able to pretty quickly corroborate where she had been.
It was unlikely that she had anything to do with his death. However, we did not rule her out immediately.
Days after Marty's gruesome death, his family and friends come together to say their goodbyes.
Marty's funeral was amazing. It was very, very sad, though, because everyone who knew him knew that he didn't deserve anything ever bad to happen to him. Everyone loved Marty. Everyone.
There was quite a bit of his workers, even his past workers, that come to his funeral. It was a good day, but a bad day at the same time.
Meanwhile, police doggedly follow each and every lead.
We did have a large suspect pool because we didn't know who all might have been working for Marty. One of the things that we wanted to get identified was who Junior was that was working on the truck. So myself and another investigator said, we'll run by the halfway houses and see if we can get Junior identified. So we went over to the Broadway house, and the director there gave us the name of Clarence Bibb Jr. He said he thought Junior was from up by Oklahoma City, and he's got a pretty extensive record, including some assault. Well, we really believe that if Junior and Marty had gotten into an altercation over the payment of the truck motor, maybe he took the money, it got out of hand, he killed Marty, took Marty's money and the truck, and took it back to Oklahoma City to chop it up.
We found that law enforcement there knew Clarence very well. They knew his family very well. And they lived in several homes that would be described as a compound, like a family compound.
And they said, don't go out there without a lot of us. Clarence is violent, and so you don't go up there by yourself.
Detectives assemble a task force with local and state police and make the 2-hour drive to Junior's compound.
When I first got out there, I thought, man, this is a real possibility. Man, we might find our truck out here. So we went up and knocked on the door. And when Clarence showed up, I thought, good Lord, this is one large man. And if he gets violent, I don't know what I'm gonna do. You look at him and you see what had happened to Marty, you're thinking that if anybody could do it, this guy could do it. He's big.
Detectives ask if he and Marty had fallen out over the work Junior had done on Marty's truck.
And he was happy with what Marty had paid him, and there was no disagreement.
He said that Marty paid him $500 more than he was supposed to because of the trouble that we went through.
And in fact, when I told him that Marty had died and that someone had caused his death, he too got emotional. Here, this big, mean, gruff country guy, and he's crying like a child over his friend's death.
He said, you know, I wouldn't hurt Marty if somebody paid me to. He said he considered Marty a mentor and a friend.
Clarence denied that he had been in Ardmore recently. He gave an alibi that he had been at home with his mom and other family members around the time of Marty's death, and they corroborated his story that he was there. He fully cooperated with the investigation. He gave us his cell phone.
He let us have clothing and boots. He let us search his house. He let us search the property. And I mean, he let us just have free reign of whatever we wanted.
And we came up with nothing. I just remember thinking to myself, man, we are absolutely going nowhere with this investigation.
With nothing to link Junior to the homicide, detectives begin to fear the investigation is cooling down.
We had a pretty good idea that it wasn't Junior at that point. Donna Hargrave had a stone-clad alibi. Chris Dyer just didn't appear to be involved. I think both Bryce and I just were disheartened. We had no leads. We had no suspects, so we were just trying to figure out where do we go from here.
Then, an unexpected call turns the case red hot.
Well, we got back to the station, and dispatch yells down to us, hey, they found your truck. We were dead tired, but you went from dead tired to wide awake in a hurry.
Four days into the investigation of Marty Lucas's murder, detectives get the break they were looking for, Marty's missing truck.
And I remember the dispatcher telling me they found the truck. And I said, where is it? And they said in Springdale, Arkansas. And so this was the break that we needed.
We're pretty excited. We're just about to go nuts. We're like, okay, get a hold of Springdale police, get them on the phone, let's find out what we got going on. It was a moment, I'll say that.
Investigators asked Springdale police how Marty's truck had ended up over 300 miles away.
A citizen had called and told them that his friend had been in possession of the truck. And his friend, he identified as Jack Latham.
But who is Jack Latham? Detectives immediately ask Marty's family if they know the name. They learned Jack was one of Marty's most trusted laborers who hadn't been seen or heard from in months.
Jack Latham, he worked for my dad for a long time. He was a really hard worker.
Marty was extremely good to Jack. He gave him extra money here and there whenever he'd need it. Marty would bring him by my house sometimes, and they would occasionally ride around together. He seemed very quiet.
It was not unusual for people to come and go in Marty's business. Jack Latham worked for him on and off a couple of years prior to this.
When detectives dig into Jack's background, they learn he has a daughter and ex-wife in Ardmore and a checkered past.
He had an extensive criminal history for drugs and theft, but he's not the guy I would have picked to have committed this crime.
Jack Latham did minor misdemeanor type crimes, drug possession type crimes, but this is not a person that would even be on the radar because he had no really violent history.
So you're not going to think that this is a guy who could kill somebody, particularly not in the manner in which Marty was killed.
Investigators rush to Arkansas, where police have taken Jack into custody and seized the truck. But before speaking with Jack, they interview the man who first contacted police about the truck, Jack's friend, Raymond.
Raymond, he says to us that out of the blue, Jack calls on Friday night and says that he has got court on Monday, can he stay for the weekend?
Raymond tells police Jack asked to get picked up at a local parking lot.
So he goes to pick him up, and he's sitting in what looks like a pretty nice Chevy pickup. And he says, hey, pickup is at? He said, oh, it's a guy that I'm visiting. He let me come sit in it to wait on you. And he says to us, I didn't believe him. Monday morning, Jack says, just take me to jail. I've got warrants. So he takes him to jail, and then he goes back home and he looks to see what the warrants are for, and it's for theft. And he thinks, I wonder if that truck's stolen, because something doesn't feel right with that truck. So he goes back to where the parking lot where the truck is and sees it doesn't have tags on it.
And so Raymond knew that Jack was lying. He knew he needed to call the police.
We went and looked at the truck, and the truck looked pristine on the inside. But when we sprayed it with Blue Star, there was blood everywhere.
We knew in the back of our minds that this was the key, that Jack Latham was the key to Marty Lucas's death.
And then the investigation took off at warp speed because, yeah, we think we've got our guy.
We went to the Benton County Jail and interviewed Jack that day.
First thing I noticed about him is he's slight of build. He's not very big. He seems to be very reserved and meek. He doesn't seem to be what I would picture to be a killer.
Then police noticed something else about Jack's appearance.
He looked pretty bad. He had some injuries to his face. He had this greenish brown black eye or injury to his eye. He had a minor abrasion to his lip.
Could Jack have suffered his injuries while attacking his former boss, Marty? Police start by asking Jack when he was in Ardmore last.
Okay. I guess at some point in time you've been in Ardmore, been around Ardmore, or lived in Ardmore or something?
Yeah, a long time ago, about 6 years ago.
Jack tells detectives he's recently been living 200 miles away in Enid, Oklahoma.
Who were you staying with?
My brother and him.
Then, investigators cut to the chase.
We've been working on an investigation for the last almost a week now. Your name's come up. And before I can really get into a lot of questions with you and details and explain to you, why we're here and all that, I got to read you your Miranda rights.
After we Mirandized him, he said he didn't want to talk to us anymore.
Do you wish to make a statement, or will you answer any questions that we have for you today?
No.
No? Okay.
With Jack refusing to talk, police need to find a way to place him near Marty's house at the time of the murder.
So, in his initial interview, he tells us that he hasn't been to Ardmore, that he came down here from his brother's house in Enid. I called Enid PD, and they went out, they talked with the brother, they talked with the brother's wife. They said, yes, he has been here at our house.
But then detectives get a stunning piece of information Jack hadn't shared.
His brother's wife said I'd put him on the bus to go see his wife and daughter in Ardmore on the Monday morning before Marty had been killed. So we knew he had gotten to Ardmore. The next day, we got a hold of the bus and found out that, yes, indeed, he had been at Ardmore.
With Jack still in custody, police drive back to Ardmore.
The detectives got a search warrant and looked through Jack's phone, and that led them to his ex-wife and daughter.
Did you see your dad in the truck last week?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you understand what kind of trouble your dad's possibly in? He's been detained as a suspect in a homicide. So you for sure haven't seen your dad since he's been in Ardmore.
Investigators talk to Jack's ex-wife, Teresa, next.
Has he came to visit you lately? No?
I haven't seen from him or heard from him.
So would it surprise you to know that Jack is involved in a homicide here in Ardmore?
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like him.
Both of them said they haven't seen Jack. He hadn't been in Ardmore. They don't know what we're talking about.
And we knew this was not true because on Jack's phone, we knew that he had called Teresa and Shelby.
And during that interview with Teresa, I laid it out for her. I just flat out told her I knew she was lying.
I'm not saying anything. I've told you guys everything I know.
No, you haven't.
Yes, sir, I have.
No, you haven't. And we can prove it. It's a matter of time before we put you in that truck. We put you in that truck, it starts getting serious in a real quick hurry.
Police start to question if Jack's ex-wife and daughter are involved in Marty's murder.
At that point, she decided that she didn't want to talk to us anymore, and she and Shelby left. And I just told her, we're not going to stop. We're going to solve this crime with or without you. The only question is, what's your role going to be?
Less than 24 hours later, police get a call.
The next day, early morning, the next morning, Teresa called, said, I want to come back and talk. So from that, I mean, that kind of broke open a whole new layer of the case.
Police investigating the murder of Marty Lucas are trying to place his friend and employee, Jack Latham, at the scene of the crime.
We knew that he was coming here to visit his wife and daughter.
They both told investigators that they did not know where Jack was. They had not seen Jack. He had not been in Ardmore.
But Jack's daughter and ex-wife returned to the police station the next day.
Yesterday, you were pretty firm that you didn't know nothing.
I was really scared and I thought about it all night and I felt really bad. Really hit home, so I had to tell the truth. I did see Jack on the 11th and 12th.
Which was what, Monday and Tuesday?
Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
And he dropped us off at my mom's house on the 13th in the morning.
Teresa says Jack stayed at an Ardmore motel on Monday and Tuesday nights.
They said Jack had called Marty to see if he had any work for him. And Marty said, no, I can't use you. I don't need you right now.
And do you know what day that was?
Tuesday night?
They both said that about 8 or 8:30 on that Wednesday morning, Jack left, sent an officer to Motel 6 to see if they had video. And sure enough, we've got video of Jack Latham leaving Motel 6, wearing the same clothes as the person that's walking. The Bolero camera picks up.
About an hour later, a green Chevrolet truck that we believe was Marty's truck shows up in the parking lot in Motel 6.
You watch him go over to a dumpster, throw something in the dumpster, which we believe was the rock and the iron. Where did he go get the truck?
He said his friend gave it to him.
Then, Jack did something even more suspicious.
When he came in, he went straight to the sink and washed his hands. He did wipe his face down, and he put his hoodie on, and he told me that he did something bad, but he wouldn't tell me what.
He said, we gotta leave, we gotta get out of here. He drops them off, and they don't see him again.
And so by then, yeah, we got enough to file charges on Jack Latham.
I called the family members and told them what we knew.
I was very shocked because Jack had been in my house around my children. He just acted very shy, but he didn't act like he would hurt anyone.
It was shocking to me because he treated Jack with respect like he did everyone else.
Police charged Jack Latham with first-degree murder and extradite him from Arkansas. When he arrives in Ardmore, Jack starts talking.
Jack told me that he was in desperate need of money. He had no job. He needed money for drugs. And he knew that Marty Lucas was the source of that money. Marty had told him no, that he knew that he wasn't clean. His story was that a physical altercation occurred, that he took a rock paperweight from the kitchen table, struck Marty with it, that in his words, he freaked out, took the keys to the truck and a few $100s from the wallet and left the area.
Jack denies attacking Marty with a stone from outside or the iron.
There were some aspects where he seemed to truly be confused about what had happened because he was strung out on drugs, including, was there an iron used?
So what had really happened? Police have their own theory as to how the murder played out.
We believe that this was premeditated.
I think he went to Marty's house, and I think he picked that rock up on the outside of the house and he knocked on the door. Because I don't think he was going to take no for an answer. And when Marty told him no, a fight ensued in which he struck Marty with the rock. I think Marty fought back. He struck him with the iron, which was readily available, and then burned him with it, whether on purpose or on accident. He took the iron and he took the rock with him, and he disposed of the evidence, and he drove to Arkansas.
It was absolutely senseless over a few $100s.
Despite the evidence, prosecutors worry defense lawyers will try to argue Jack was desperate and never planned to kill Marty.
I thought that this case met the elements from a legal standpoint of first-degree murder, but then you have to be mindful of the fact that a jury would think also Jack's explanation is somewhat believable. He's a hopeless junkie. He's desperate for money.
With the family's consent, prosecutors charged Jack with second-degree murder.
We didn't want to risk going to trial and then letting him free.
In October 2020, Jack Latham pleads guilty and is sentenced to 25 years in prison.
I feel like we got justice. I know he's going to be locked up and my family's going to be safe.
Jack was very unexpected as a killer because he just didn't act like he was that type of person.
Jack Latham, he's still a mystery to me, because just by being around him, I never thought he would do something like that.
He did this for nothing. There was no reason for nothing.
Marty was such a nice guy. But not only that, I mean, think of all the people whose lives he affected in a positive way. That's a sense of loss for our community.
When I lost Marty, I lost my life too. He was the most amazing person I could ever. Sorry.
Despite Marty...
दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी भाईया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा विच ना छोड़ी भाईया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा विच ना छोड़ी छोड़ी तेरा विच ना छोड़ी तेरा विच ना छोड़ी तेरा विच ना छोड़ी थोड़ निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े थोड़ निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे ओ फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे सजना दे छोड़े नी बहुत कोल वध के लोगो सजना दे छोड़े नी ये प्यार भुला गया है प्यार भुला गया है रातां दे जगराते मत साडे वे लागे आए रातां दे जगराते मत साडे वे लागे आए तेरी याद सताती है तेरी याद सताती है वो दिन बेचैन लगे रात नींद न आती है दिन बेचैन लगे रात नींद न आती है दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी भाईया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा विच ना छोड़ी भाईया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा विच ना छोड़ी 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 थोड़ी निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े थोड़ी निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे ओ फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे सजना दे छोड़े नी बहुत कोल वध के लोगो सजना दे छोड़े नी प्यार भुला गया प्यार भुला गया रातां दे जगराते मत साढ़े वेला गया रातां दे जगराते मत साढ़े वेला गया तेरी याद